Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Ladar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel with all of the biggest stories from across the region. Here are the latest developments. There's been dramatic escalation in the Gulf just ahead of the second round of U.S.-Iran talks, which are due to take place in Islamabad tomorrow. A U.S. Navy destroyer has seized an Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. U.S. Central Command on Monday morning said U.S. Marines departed the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli by helicopter and transited over the Arabian Sea to board and seize the Iranian-flagged Tuska. The Marines rappelled onto the vessel after a guided missile from the USS Spruance disabled the Tuska's propulsion. This after the commercial ship failed to comply with repeated warnings from the U.S. Navy for over 6 hours. Washington claims the ship was under sanctions with a history of illegal activity and that its cargo is now being inspected. The incident unfolded in the Gulf of Oman just south of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply flows, and it takes place just 2 days before the 2-week ceasefire is set to expire. And despite the maritime incident, U.S. President Donald Trump insists U.S.-Iran talks will resume tomorrow in Pakistan, with White House envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff heading to Islamabad for negotiations. Trump warned that if Tehran does not agree to a deal, the consequences would be severe, saying the country could be blown up, adding that potential targets include Iranian bridges and power plants. Trump said his demands include reopening the Strait of Hormuz and Iran giving up its highly enriched uranium. The president has expressed optimism, saying the concept of the deal is done and there is a very good chance of success. But while Trump says talks are on, Iranian officials have, according to the regime's official news agency, rejected the second round of talks on Sunday night. And today, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman reiterated that Iran will not join the talks in Pakistan. Additionally, according to Reuters, differences over Iran's nuclear program still remain, and Tehran says its missile program is not open to negotiation, casting doubt on whether an agreement will be reached by the time the ceasefire expires on Wednesday. Let's take a listen. Well, we don't have that clip, so let's continue. Meanwhile, Pakistan is reportedly exerting maximum pressure on Iran to ensure that talks do go ahead as scheduled tomorrow. But at this hour, it remains unclear whether talks will in fact be held in Islamabad and whether any real progress will in fact be made towards advancing a deal. Joining us now to discuss the latest with the Islamic Republic of Iran is Jonathan Shanzer, Executive Director at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
So we're heading for a critical juncture. The ceasefire is coming to an end on Wednesday. Talks are supposed to resume in Pakistan tomorrow, but we're hearing two very different versions. President Trump insisting that talks are taking place, that a deal is almost practically agreed upon, while in Iran they're saying huge gaps remain and there will be no talks. So what is going on? Are there going to be talks tomorrow? And if so, at what level?
Well, I think we're going to see talks. The question is, how long do they last? If you look back at the last round headed by J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, they lasted for something like 6 to 8 hours before it all collapsed. And J.D. Vance decided that it was time to just turn around and go home because nothing more could be accomplished. And I think that reflects a broader problem here, which is that of the narratives of the two sides. Donald Trump continues to make this a fairly simple transaction. He's basically telling the regime, stop firing at the rest of the countries around the region, stop engaging in aggression, we will stop firing back and open up the Strait of Hormuz, and we're good to go. That's basically been the president's plan. The Iranians don't like that, right? They don't like the idea that the United States is dominating the terms of these discussions. Of course, the U.S. should be, because we're the superpower here at the table, but the regime is not willing to cede defeat. They are certainly not willing to allow the United States to continue to maintain this closure over ports in the Persian Gulf and going through the Strait of Hormuz. So we have a battle of narratives here. both sides want to be able to walk away from this to be able to declare victory to their people at home and around the world. And so it is a test of wills, and I expect that to continue. I do think that the narrative about victory may be even more important to both countries than stopping the war.
Now, you mentioned Vice President J.D. Vance, who headed, of course, the last round of talks. There's been some controversy as to whether he will participate in the talks in the second round, assuming they do, in fact, take place. Is he going to take part? What's the latest on that?
I've seen the reports that said he wasn't going and that Donald Trump said he wasn't going. And then I saw reports that he was. I think we just don't know. I mean, let me just say that the discipline from the Trump team surrounding leaks, surrounding specific information relating to the talks, relating to the war, relating to the strategy, it's been very difficult. And I think there have been a lot of journalists in the United States and around the world who've been expressing a certain amount of frustration that they don't have always the fuller picture. I think it almost doesn't matter. I mean, I do think that it's important that there are representatives of the United States government that represent the trust and the thinking of the president. But does it need to be J.D. Vance? No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly a cloud of confusion surrounding everything, and some saying, of course, that it's not on accident. It's a deliberate strategy, by President Trump. Now, I want to also get into sort of the main issues here, because President Trump is placing an emphasis mainly on the nuclear issue as well as the Strait of Hormuz, of course. But what gaps remain there today from what we know?
All of them. I mean, unfortunately, at the end of the day, you have an Islamic Republic government that refuses to stop. They call it the right to enrich. They say that this is sort of a national heritage issue, but they don't want to give up on their nuclear program, even though it's been effectively destroyed and that the 440 kilos of uranium are purportedly buried deep beneath the ground. They don't even have control over it, but they don't want to give up on the idea that they would control it. And then on top of that, the demands to end the missile program, that's going to be rebuffed. The demands to end the support for the proxies, that's also being rebuffed. If anything, right now you see the Islamic Republic trying to extend sovereignty over Lebanon as this ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon continues to limp along. It is the Iranians claiming that they were the ones that forced the ceasefire, that imposed the terms on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to end at least that war for a time. This is an attempt by the regime to say, we have Lebanon. It is ours. And so what you see here is, in effect, every one of the major demands that the United States has placed on the Islamic Republic, they're pushing back on that narrative. Again, this is about their ability to go back to the 90 million people in Iran, to be able to show them that they are still in control, that they're still strong. At least that's the goal here. And the reason why is they're fearful. They're fearful of the people. They just rose up back in January. It was a massive protest movement aimed at bringing down the regime. The regime slaughtered 30 to 40,000 people in an effort to kind of beat back those hordes. But the question is, will they come back out again? And I think that is really what the Islamic Republic leadership, whatever's left, that is what they are very afraid of right now. They don't want to have to contain another major uprising.
Mm-hmm. And, that goes along as well with the missile program. According to regime's officials just today, Iran is unwilling to negotiate on its ballistic missile program as well. And, I do want to go back now to one of the main points of contention, of course, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, there's a U.S. naval blockade in place, but Iran has announced it's shutting down the strait, and it has attacked two ships just over the weekend. So, what is the status of the strait right now? On the one hand, you have the blockade. On the other hand, you have Iran saying, well, we're shutting down, the strait. And what are Iran's capabilities? What capabilities does it even have left in terms of being able to block ships from passing through the strait?
Sure. Well, I mean, the things have not changed really at all. What happened when we look back, I mean, the United States and Israel won the conventional war in every major sense. The regime was degraded. All of its military capabilities, the significant ones anyway, destroyed by the United States and Israel. Sure, there are probably still some targets left, but I think we've probably reached a point of diminishing returns in terms of how much more damage can be struck. I'm sure there are targets, but I think they're fewer and far between right now. And so basically what happened is the Islamic Republic decided to wage an asymmetric economic war against the United States, in particular, leave Israel out of it because this was not Israel's major battle, but it was for the United States because Donald Trump cares deeply about the cost of oil. He cares deeply about the price of natural gas. He cares deeply about the stock markets. I mean, all of these things are major concerns for him, and the Islamic Republic found his Achilles heel. It's prosperity. That's essentially how you sum up what his concerns are. And so, as the Islamic Republic moved to shut down the Strait of Hormuz by attacking, I don't know, I think it was 16 or so different ships, it wasn't a huge number that were hit, but it was enough to scare the market. And that's when Donald Trump decided to make a move for this ceasefire. Then we have the imposition of the American-led economic war. That's what's going on right now. But the regime is also fighting back and doing the same. So they are both shutting down traffic in the ways that they know how. The United States through boarding ships along the lines of what you've described earlier, and then you've got the Islamic Republic through asymmetric means. Yet again, I mean, they have some fast boats, but they also have shoulder-fired weaponry. They've got the kinds of weapons that they can bring to bear here that are extremely difficult to stop and to interdict on the part of the United States, right? These are small weapons, small tools that they have where they can, with just the ability to shut down one or two ships from moving across the Strait of Hormuz, that's enough to spook the insurers, the reinsurers, and the entire energy market. That is, I mean, this Persian Gulf is 20% of the world's energy. And so it has the psychological impact. So the regime is fighting back. Even as the United States imposes this closure, it will hurt the regime an enormous amount. Something like $400 million per day is getting blocked from the Islamic Republic. They can't make those trades. That is a difficult thing for their economy, but they are imposing pain in return. And so what you have, yet again, it's a test of wills between the United States and the Islamic Republic. It doesn't matter that the United States is so much stronger than the regime. The regime is still able to force a price upon the United States. And in fact, on the entire world, because everything that is happening right now is rattling markets from Europe to Asia to Latin America and beyond.
And we are at this hour seeing reports that Pakistan is trying to levy some pressure on the United States to perhaps scale back its blockade in an effort to sort of appease Iran and bring them back to the negotiating table. So as you said, a battle of wills. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. And, you know, you mentioned the bombing campaign, the military strikes. President Trump has said that if negotiations fail in Pakistan, that he has no problem going back and bombing, he said, bomb the hell out of the country or something to that extent. And, you know, he said that the energy infrastructure is what's next. Now, that's something that he's been clearly trying to avoid reaching that point. He doesn't want to strike the energy infrastructure. He doesn't want to strike, for example, Karj Island, which is where most of Iran's oil is coming from. So, you know, I want to ask you, are you optimistic that an agreement will be reached? Because it seems that no matter how much President Trump is trying to impose an agreement, saying that, you know, an agreement is taking place, that they've agreed to most of the major points of contention, the nuclear and the Strait of Hormuz, the IRGC is continuing to fight back. And now they're saying they're not even going to show up for the negotiations. I mean, so what are the chances that fighting will resume after the ceasefire ends?
Look, I think right now, unfortunately, it does look like there's a pretty high probability of continued conflict. The Pakistanis appear to be scrambling to try to bridge the gap, but the gap seems significant. I mean, the Islamic Republic does not seem to be afraid of another round. They continue to provoke the United States. Their actions in the Strait of Hormuz, I think, speak for themselves. If they were chastened, if they were thinking that it was time to finally cede to some of the demands of the United States, I think we would not be seeing this aggression in the Persian Gulf. We would not be seeing this violence. So the fact that they continue to provoke the United States, the fact that they continue to wage that asymmetric economic war against the U.S. and, as I mentioned, against the entire world, one does get a sense that we are heading in to this next round in Islamabad with only a couple days left to the ceasefire, with the Islamic Republic in full defiance mode. And so, yeah, that probably means more strikes by the United States. Maybe the Israelis join again. I'm assuming that is likely, although maybe not necessary, given how much has already been destroyed inside the Islamic Republic. This could be narrowed down to battles that take place within the Persian Gulf, in and around the Strait of Hormuz, because that is where the contested territory remains. That's what's left. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the Islamic Republic is playing with fire here. I think they're in deep trouble. I think that if they continue to lose that $400+ million per day in trade from the U.S. blockade, and they've lost a huge amount of infrastructure, military as well as civilian, back home on the mainland, all of these things, I think, are going to redound to their disadvantage. I think they will have a harder time holding on the longer this thing plays out. They think that they can play Donald Trump. They think they can play him for time because they believe that he is uncomfortable with the idea of a prolonged economic challenge, a prolonged crisis in the Persian Gulf. But what I think they misunderstand is the longer this goes on, the higher the likelihood of domestic collapse. In other words, they might just not be able to hold on to continue to govern the place. Certainly, they aren't going to be able to pay salaries. You may find loyalists leaving their positions. These are the sorts of things that I'm sure the Islamic Republic is worried about as it fights for that battle for victory.
Absolutely. So really critical and dramatic days ahead. Jonathan Shanzer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And turning now to Lebanon, where amid the fragile 10-day ceasefire, the IDF published a map showing its new forward defense line. This as the IDF maintains a presence in southern Lebanon. The army says 5 IDF divisions alongside naval forces are operating south of the line to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure and prevent threats to northern Israeli communities. The map shows that troops have crossed the Litani River, a key geographic marker long associated with efforts to push Hezbollah forces northward, and are holding the strategic Beaufort Bridge. Defense Minister Katz says that troops will use full force to counter any threats to troops. Let's listen to what he had to say.
אנו מקיימים את המעמד הזה, כאשר צה"ל ערוך באזור הביטחון בלבנון עד לקו הנ"ט, בעומק של עד 10 קילומטרים, מקו הים במערב ועד למבואות החרמון במזרח. מהקו הזה, אותו כבשו חיילינו הגיבורים, מגן צה"ל על היישובים הישראלים מפני כל איום ישיר. ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו ואני הנחינו את צה"ל לפעול בכל העוצמה, גם מהיבשה וגם מהאוויר וגם במהלך הפסקת האש, כדי להגן על חיילינו בלבנון מפני כל איום.
And joining us now with more on the Lebanon ceasefire is Colonel Dr. Jacques Nerias, Special Analyst for the Middle East at the JCFA and a former Chief Analyst of Israeli Military Intelligence. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the ceasefire in Lebanon, it's very fragile. It was imposed on Israel at the request of U.S. President Trump. So first of all, what do you make of the ceasefire?
Well, as you said so rightly, I mean, this is a very fragile ceasefire, and I don't know how long it will hold, because certainly this buffer zone that has been created in the north of the Israeli border is the target of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not going to rest until, I mean, he sees again Israeli withdrawal from the Lebanese territory. This happened between 1982 till the year 2000, and it is going to happen again now, especially after he's being accused by the detractors, his critics, that he was the one who just pulled Israel back into Lebanese territory. So he has to prove himself, and in fact, this front will be disconnected from the main front. I mean, the Iranian front, even though Hezbollah is, I would say, is a part of the puzzle of the Iranian front facing Israel and the United States. Hezbollah, in fact, is a unit inside the Quds division of the ICRG, and in fact they are commanded by Iranian officers who just came in at the beginning of January, more than 100 officers of the ICRG, and they are commanding the troops there, and they are directing the fire against Israel. So this is what we are facing, and in fact, I mean, the security zone that has been created has reached one goal, meaning that it is a buffer zone between the Radwan forces and the localities around the Israeli borders, and it prevents an incursion like the one that happened on the 7th of October. But does this protect the Israeli localities? Does this protect Haifa, Nahariya, Afula, and all the cities in the northern part of Israel? Certainly not. We know that, I mean, during the conflict, just before the ceasefire, missiles were fired from south of the Litani, meaning, I mean, not very far from our lines. And the missiles just flew over the head of our soldiers there, and they could not prevent their impact on the localities. So this is not the solution. Certainly, we'll have to see what sort of development will happen. Certainly, what would be the reaction of Israel if Hezbollah continues to its activities or its terrorist activities against the presence of our soldiers there?
Mentioned the sort of the disconnection between the two fronts. Now, Israel was hoping to sever this connection between the Iranian front and the Lebanese front. Do you believe that they have done that? Because there are reports, of course, that President Trump imposed the ceasefire on Israel at the request of Iran, and to sort of bring Iran to the negotiating table. So, what is your analysis of that?
Well, the sequence is the following. Iran has created a front of support for Hezbollah. As such, and as seeing that Hezbollah is part of the Iranian front, they have imposed on President Trump a condition. He wants ceasefire with to be respected between Iran and the United States. So it has to be the same in Lebanon. So in fact, President Trump has contributed to join those two fronts by declaring, by imposing a ceasefire on Israel in the Lebanese front, whereas he could have said, okay, the Lebanese front, as he said before, is a different front. Hezbollah is a different enemy, but this is not the case. He just wanted to please the Iranians, and the price of it is being paid by Israel. The United States began its campaign against Israeli activities in Lebanon by asking Israel not to bomb the Dahya, the southern suburbs of Beirut, the main headquarters of Hezbollah. Then the United States asked not to bomb Baalbek, the area in the Bekaa Valley, the north of the Bekaa Valley, and all was reduced finally to the security zone. And this security zone, let us consider, we are talking about a belt of between 5 and 10 kilometers deep inside Lebanon. We are not talking about a buffer zone that extends till the Litani and prevents incursions 30 kilometers from the border. No, it's 5 kilometers from the border, and in my view, it serves nothing.
Mm-hmm. And that's the map, of course, that the IDF has released today of the defensive positions. So when you're looking at this map, and we see it now on the screen in front of us, you're saying it's not enough, essentially, to protect Israel's north from Hezbollah attacks. When you look at this map now, does anything jump out at you? We do see that Israel has IDF forces north of the Litani River. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that this map is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for the army because, you are extended from on more than 120 kilometers with 5 divisions. Now, how long can you keep those 5 divisions in place? Now, bearing in mind that you have also to deploy the divisions facing Syria, divisions facing the Jordanian border, divisions facing the Egyptian border, and more than 40 battalions in the West Bank. So where does this all those units come from? I mean, how long can you stay with that? At the time when we were present in South Lebanon, in the years 1976 till the year 2000, we had the Army of South Lebanon, headed by first by Saad Haddad and then by General Lahad, and there were 90% of the elements of deployment were theirs. And I mean, Israel had one battalion here, one battalion there. Maybe at the utmost we had a paratroopers brigade. Now we have 5 divisions. 5 divisions. It's money, it's time, and it's costly. And of course, I mean, we cannot evade the fact that this deployment is I would say is exactly what Hezbollah is waiting for. I mean, this is what, because you cannot you will have 20 fortified positions in the whole area. Between those positions, Hezbollah can move. And I mean, you will have to fight the Hezbollah in those positions, and Hezbollah is not going to raise a white flag. Hezbollah is in the suicidal mode. Hezbollah knows that he cannot match the might of Israel, but he says, I mean, Naim Qassem said it more than once. He is fighting for history. They are fighting the Karbala syndrome. The Karbala syndrome is if you don't, I mean, let me remind the audience, is a battle that was waged in the 7th century between the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. He had 70 comrades fighting with him against an army of 4,000. He knew ahead of time that he was going to be beaten, he was going to be defeated, and in fact, after 3 days, his head was beheaded. But this is part of the Shias. This is part of the narrative of Shia, and this suicidal mode, we see it in Iran, we see it in Hezbollah, and this is the way we have to fight. They will fight till the last, and they will not surrender.
President Trump has invited Netanyahu and Aoun to the White House, but many here in Israel, I think just like yourself, are very skeptical that even if some kind of deal is reached with Lebanon, at the diplomatic, political level, Hezbollah will, of course, not abide by it. As you just said, they are on a suicidal mission. And it takes us back, essentially, to square one. I mean, we've been here before. The Lebanese government, the Lebanese army, were supposed to have already dismantled Hezbollah by now. But that clearly did not happen. Here we are again. So what is different this time? Why should Israel be going to the White House, be playing along, be agreeing to this ceasefire?
Well, we have to please Uncle Donald. This is what we have to do. And if it means that we have to go to travel to Washington, then we'll do that. In fact, I mean, I'm afraid that I'm pouring cold water on all those on all this scheme. I mean, I'm looking at the past experience we had with Lebanon in 1983. We reached an agreement after 4 months of negotiations. We signed the agreement. They signed the agreement. It was ratified by Parliament. And finally, the president, Amin Ismail, was supposed to put his final signature in order to begin implementation, and he refused because he was afraid of the Syrians. Now it's at the time it was afraid of the Syrians. Now it's afraid of Hezbollah and Iran. Hezbollah is already threatening Joseph Aoun to kill him, assassinate him. I mean, it has been said plainly by one member of parliament of Hezbollah, Mahmoud Kamati, and he said that the fate of Joseph Aoun will be the same as the one that of Anwar Sadat. So and Hezbollah has threatened the government, says, wait and see. We'll see when the war will end. We'll have to you have to do some explaining to us, because we are going to take over the place. Now, this is what Hezbollah is planning. On the 9th of April, there was an attempted coup d'etat that failed, a botched coup d'etat on the 9th of October of April, and this failed because on the same day there was this sudden attack of Israel in 10 minutes. We had eliminated 250 terrorists, and more than 2,000 were injured, and this prevented the takeover of Beirut. And now we see it from what's happening on the ground. The government has asked the army to protect Greater Beirut. This is the only place that the army can deploy loyal units, because 60% of this army are Shiites, and their officers are definitely molds of Hezbollah inside the Lebanese army. Even the commander of the army is somebody that you cannot trust, because he has lied to the Lebanese public, he has lied to the Americans, he has lied to the Lebanese government by saying that the south of the Litani has been cleared and from Hezbollah presence. What do you mean cleared from Hezbollah presence? We see that on the ground. We see that all the time. So there's no one in Lebanon, there's no entity in Lebanon that can provide us the support that we need in case we reach an agreement with the Lebanese government. You will not see boots on the ground from the United States. It's enough what happened in 1983 in the barracks. You don't see that with the French. It is enough what happened with them in the Dakar. You don't see that with the Italians. We don't see that even with us. We don't want to be there. So what the end of it? If even Joseph Aoun is not ready to declare, only declaration that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. Look what happened during the meeting between the army chief, the Lebanese army chief, with Senator Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham asked him, do you consider Hezbollah to be a terrorist organization? And what was his answer? Not in the context of Lebanon. And this organization has assassinated the prime minister, Rafik Hariri, has assassinated more than 60 personalities in Lebanon who declared themselves against Hezbollah, and still they don't see it as a terrorist organization. What are we talking about? So, if this is the body that is going to provide our protection for this agreement, well, I prefer not to rely on it.
Absolutely. So clearly pessimism here in Israel on any prospect for real peace between Israel and Lebanon. Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And so diplomacy, whether successful or not, is still the word of the day. Whether in Lebanon or in Iran, President Trump is trying to lead to a diplomatic resolution. There is doubt, however, being cast as to whether talks will be held tomorrow as scheduled in Islamabad. And it is interesting that Pakistan has found itself as the mediator for these talks. Joining us now to discuss the role of Pakistan in these negotiations is Hassan Hashimi Pirzada, Pakistani geopolitical analyst. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, it's very interesting that Pakistan has found itself as the mediator in these negotiations. Previously Oman had fulfilled this role. So my question to you, first of all, is how did Pakistan secure this role and why?
I think Pakistan has secured the role of Pakistan relationship with the Trump administration for the last 1.5 years. Pakistan has developed a very good connection with President Trump and the rest of the team, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. There were also news about Pakistan's Chief of Defense Forces gone to Oman when the last negotiation were happening as well. Also, Pakistan gave advice in the last 12 days war as well. Pakistani CDF was invited for a luncheon at the White House, where after a few days, there was an end to the 12-day war as well. And President Trump has repeatedly said that about good things about the Chief of Defense Forces, Sayyid Asim Munir, and also the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, that they both are very good men who have, are working in good faith for the diplomacy for the region. The reason why Pakistan is there because of the Iran's attacks on the GCC. So Pakistan is left the only good mediator who has not been attacked, but also has a very good relationship with the administration in Iran as well. Pakistan played a role, as I say, in the last 12-day wars as well. Also was a mediator in the Houthis when there was a Houthi solution developed in Riyadh. Pakistan bridged that way by getting Ali Larjani there in Saudi and talking with Prince Khalid. So those are all the background of why Pakistan is critical at the moment. Pakistan Chief of Defense Forces has spent 3 days in Tehran ironing out every single detail out of there. At the moment, we are obviously hearing a lot of stories that the negotiation might go ahead or not. But on the ground situation is the diplomatic activity is very high. There are arrival of the U.S. Contingent as well, and there is news of Iranians coming as well sooner, later in the day or tomorrow.
So what do you, I mean, because we are hearing so many contradicting sides, contradicting stories. President Trump insisting that talks are taking place, also insisting that most of the points have practically been agreed upon. But in Iran, they are still saying that huge gaps remain and they are rejecting talks. They rejected them last night. Again, the foreign ministry spokesman rejected them today. But you're saying that there are going to be talks tomorrow in Islamabad.
It could at the moment the news is that it's going to happen tomorrow. It can delay a day or so as well. We have just heard the news through Reuters that President Trump has talked with the Chief of Defense Forces, Sayed Asim Munir, who has advised President Trump on rethinking of lifting the blockade of Iranian vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. So if that happens, that is the only issue which is remaining at the moment. We have heard Bakr Kalibaf interview yesterday as well, in which he has given some sort of idea to the own domestic audience that negotiations are necessary. So Iranians last time as well, when they were in Pakistan, before that, there were some kind of domestic posturing happening to please the domestic audience, but the contingent still came and a very good delegation of a good amount of people from all walks of their political and military were there. So I think so at this time as well, Pakistan is anticipating that they are going to come because the activities in Islamabad point out towards that this is going to happen.
And I want to also ask, we talked a little bit about Pakistan's relations with the United States and, of course, with Iran, but what are its relations with other Gulf countries, notably Saudi Arabia and Qatar?
Pakistan has very good relationship with Saudi. As you are aware, Pakistan has a defense pact with the Saudis as well. We have seen a small deployment in Saudi of Pakistan air fleets as well. So there's some ground personnel as well. But these relationship with Saudi goes decades long. They are a strategic relationship. They are the relationship built on brotherhood. Also Qatar as well. So Pakistan has always been really good with the GCC countries and vice versa. They are very good with Pakistan as well. Pakistan is one of the strongest nation in terms of military in that region. So obviously there are strategic alliances between all these countries with Pakistan. So the relationships are really good. And I think so after this war will end, these relationships will enhance more because Pakistan has, presented itself that it's not only just a military might, it's also a good mediator as well. And if the region has to keep, running smoothly, Pakistan will be the new operator in there.
Now, despite all of this, we did hear very troubling comments from a senior Pakistani official regarding Israel last week. He made some very derogatory comments about Israel. But, looking at this new Middle East vision that President Trump has on the relations between Pakistan and the United States, is there any chance, do you feel, that Pakistan would join the Abraham Accords at the end of this war with Iran once all the dust settles, or are we very far away from such an agreement?
I think so. We are very far away from such an agreement. After this war and the war, what happened before as well, all these instances at the moment, I think so, is not the fertile ground for Pakistan to get into Abraham Accord. And that's, I think so, is very far away. Even though if you see other GCC countries getting into that Abraham Accord, Pakistan will be the very last one to get into. I don't see the conditions within Pakistan which are favorable towards that. I think so there is a lot of confidence building measures which need to be happen before that. Once this will go through, we have to see how these negotiations will end and how Iran and US and Israel future relationships will go. I think so that will based a lot on that region as well, and also on Pakistan in the future, but I don't see that happening in the very near future.
So still a long ways away. Hassan Hashimi Pirzada, thank you so much for joining us today and for your unique analysis.
Thank you so much.
And before we continue, a quick word from Haifa University. The University of Haifa stands at the forefront of global impact, ranking #1 in Israel, and has been ranked among the top 100 universities worldwide for sustainability. Here, environmental responsibility, social justice, and academic research come together to build a better future.
Haifa International also has adopted the sustainability perspective, where we take part also in high-impact work that is informed by academic research to ensure that we have a better world to live in.
From marine research in the Mediterranean to community-focused programs shaping peace and equality, students engage directly with the issues that matter.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience, and it opens your mind, your network, and your world.
Study where innovation meets purpose on a campus committed to progress, diversity, and global citizenship. Master your mind, live your Israel experience. Shape a sustainable future at Haifa International. All right, and moving on to our final story tonight. Israel prepares to mark Yom HaZikaron beginning tonight. Ceremonies are already underway across the country honoring the nation's fallen. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman was at Mount Herzl today. She has the latest.
Well, thank you. As Israel enters Memorial Day, ceremonies taking place across the country are set to honor the fallen, with the number of those lost rising over the past year, even as the nation prepares to mark another year of independence. This year, the toll has grown. According to figures released by the Defense Ministry, more than 170 soldiers have been added to the list of Israel's fallen since last Memorial Day, alongside 54 veterans who died from service-related injuries. In total, more than 25,640 men and women have died in defense of the state. The ministry also says there are now nearly 60,000 bereaved families across Israel. Data released by the Central Bureau of Statistics shows Israel's population now stands at more than 10.2 million people. Nearly 27% are children, underscoring the country's young and growing population. Over the past year, some 177,000 babies were born, and tens of thousands of immigrants arrived. Here at Mount Herzl, the weight of the loss is everywhere you look. But so is something else, a sense of continuity. In Israel, remembrance and renewal are never separate. They exist side by side, shaping a nation that continues to move forward, even in the most difficult moments. Back to you.
Thank you to Maayan Hoffman for the report, and for the full report, tune in tonight to ILTV News Daily News for our main news broadcast at 7:30 p.m. Israel time. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We're here every hour on the hour with the latest breaking developments, in-depth reports, and exclusive insights into the stories shaping the region and the world. I'm Lidar Lazi. Thank you so much for watching, and stay safe. And joining us now with more on the ongoing U.S. naval blockade of Iran is retired Navy Admiral James Thogo Dean at the Center for Maritime Strategy. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be with ILTV today. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Operation Epic Fury has had some remarkable achievements, especially by the air, but no less by the U.S. Navy. We've seen the use of the Navy in this war in a way that, at least here in Israel, we haven't seen in a very long time. What can you tell us about the use of the Navy as a method of warfare in this operation?
Well, Epic Fury has clearly engaged a preponderance of U.S. naval forces, both deployed and those in reserve. And we have brought additional carrier strike groups into the theater, either the Red Sea, the eastern side of the Mediterranean, or down in the approaches to the Gulf. And that just goes to show the value of nuclear power and the ability to move 100,000-ton ships extremely quickly throughout the theater or swing from one theater to another. Additionally, we've got expeditionary strike groups, which is a Marine expeditionary unit, about 2,200 Marines on three sets of ships per expeditionary strike group, with additional aircraft, the F-35B, and lots of capability, counter-drone capability, self-defense capability, and other helicopters and V-22s that can participate in amphibious landings if necessary. So there's a lot of Navy force out there, and I'm very happy to see that the Navy is leading this campaign and the Navy is leading this blockade. And quite frankly, I think the blockade was a brilliant stroke at this point, since Iran depends on the Strait of Hormuz to export about 90% of its oil, but not just that, goods and services going in and out of the country. So it puts the pressure on the Iranian government and the Iranian leadership to get back to the negotiating table.
That actually leads to my next question, which, President Trump has said that the Islamic regime in Iran has really extorted the world through the Strait of Hormuz, and now the U.S. has sort of turned the tables, blockading the Iranian ports, while saying that it is ensuring freedom of navigation. So, you said this is a brilliant strategy. Can you perhaps expand on that a little bit and talk also about the impact of this on Iran?
Certainly. Well, first of all, the Strait of Hormuz is an international strait. So it is nobody's strait. Nobody owns it. Everybody has access to it under the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. So I find it outrageous that the government of Iran would try to control the strait and control traffic. Furthermore, somebody asked me the other day on a news program, well, what is a blockade? Technically speaking, a blockade is an act of war. It's something that the United States Navy has done throughout its history for hundreds of years. The blockade of the Barbary pirates in North Africa, for example, in the very beginnings of our Navy. The blockade of the South during the American Civil War, tragic as it may have been, but the Union Navy blockaded the southern ports and would not allow guns or butter, foodstuffs, supplies, uniforms to get in there. And it frankly was a cost-imposing strategy that broke the back of the Confederacy and ultimately ended the war. And so we know how to do these things. Iran made a calculated decision to try to restrict access, and also it's illegal to charge a $2 million toll and operate the strait like a toll booth for each of the ships going through there. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. So there's about 100 ships that pass through the strait on any given day. And at $2 million a pop for a toll, if you multiply that out by 100 ships and 365 days a year, if I did my math correctly, that's a take or a profit for Iran of $73 billion in 1 year. General Petraeus made a comment the other day that there's a fudge factor there, and with all the other goods and services, that number is really $90 billion in profit. So somewhere between 73, 75, and 90 billion going into the Iranian economy. That's more than the United States government allocated for the ship construction budget for the United States Navy in our $1 trillion defense budget. So that gives the Iranians the opportunity to rebuild and reconstitute those threats that we just spent the last month eliminating. So that would be air defense artillery, a Navy which rests on the bottom of Davy Jones' locker, as Americans will say, in the bottom of the sea, and other war materials that can be used against Israel, against our allies and partners, or against the United States itself. And the Iranians have proven that they have used missiles and other tools and mines now to restrict or attack the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. And I believe that was a big strategic mistake on their part, because now the GCC has no sympathy for Iran. Everybody is rallying to try to stop this war and to try to prevent Iran from reconstitution. So we can't allow them to charge a toll. We can't allow them to rearm and rebuild. We need to compel them to get back to the negotiating table, and that's what the blockade is all about.
So the U.S. Navy doing remarkable work. Admiral James Thogo, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Well, joining us now to help us break down this rapidly changing situation in the Middle East is the former National Security Council Senior Director under President George W. Bush and Managing Director at Beacon Global Strategies, Michael Allen. Michael, thank you so much for joining the broadcast today. I want to ask you, at this point in the war, what is President Trump trying to accomplish? Because, as you know, many of his messages seem unclear to many or even contradictory at times.
Well, I think now he is trying to negate the leverage that Iran had by threatening to blow up commercial tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. This is exactly where we ought to be focused. This would have been really dangerous if we had somehow ended this conflict with Iran feeling like they could dictate to the world how many ships got through, that they were able to do a toll booth. And so that was the worst of all worlds. And he's moving now towards reopening the straits. More ships are getting through, not enough yet. But I think this has been his primary focus. And this, I think, eventually, by blockading the Iranian ports, may put the heat on them to want to come to the table and make more substantive concessions.
Now, we saw yesterday the Mossad chief David Barnea speaking about how the war in Iran isn't over until the Islamic Republic falls. Are we seeing a divergence between U.S. goals and Israeli objectives here, or is he speaking more long-term vision of the Middle East, do you think?
Well, I do think at some point there is a divergence. I think the United States would love to see the regime collapse. I think people have reluctantly made the conclusion that it's not something that's going to happen automatically. I think we hope that we'll look back on this campaign and once the regime collapses and say this was an important milestone. But, I think Trump is trying to move to a new situation where we have a completely degraded Iran. Their nuclear program has taken big hits. Obviously, their military has. The Strait is reopened, and Iran wants to do a deal. So, at some point we diverge, although we both have the same ultimate goal.
You know, the media has claimed that the Islamic Republic was offered a 20-year freeze on any uranium enrichment by the United States. Is that something you think could actually rein in the regime, or even 20 years is simply giving them a temporary survival lifeline to continue their work towards a weapon later on?
Yeah, I think it would give them a lifeline. 20 years is a long time, but still. And by the way, that sounds a lot like the Obama era JCPOA that tried to put time limits on things. And I think once the president focused on it when J.D. Vance came back, he rightfully yesterday sort of disavowed the 20 years and said he wasn't interested in it. That's not to say it couldn't be resuscitated. There are reports, of course, that we may have a second round of negotiations sometime soon. I expect the ceasefire to be extended. So the issue is probably not over yet, but I'm not expecting it.
Now, is it possible to make a deal with this regime which actually meets all the demands of the United States?
Not as our demands exist today. We obviously want them to abandon support for terrorism. Their ballistic missile program should be severely cut back. We want them to turn over their highly enriched uranium. I'm still of the view that the maximum that Iran can give does not meet the minimum that the United States can accept. So I'm glad they're going to run a few plays. They're going to try to get some sort of arrangement. I think Trump will try to be creative, but at the end of the day, if pressed, I see a de facto indirect ceasefire persisting, but I don't see really a huge deal coming anytime soon.
All right, well, we'll continue to follow that closely. I want to thank you for your time today, Michael Allen.
Thank you.
As Israel prepares for Passover, the holiday is unfolding under the shadow of war. Nearly 1.5 million people are living with food insecurity as thousands of families are displaced and many still don't know where they'll sit down for Seder night. Since the war began, Leket Israel has distributed more than 2,000 tons of produce and tens of thousands of meals. Let's take a closer look.
Hi, it's Joseph Gittler, founder and chairman of Leket Israel. Today I'm in Kiryat Sharet, where a food distribution to those in need is about to happen. One of the Leket trucks just showed up with an entirely full truck of a wide range of produce. We're now in the 4th week of the war. There are volunteers here helping out in order to do this distribution, which is going to happen very, very soon. I just spoke with the manager of this organization, and she told me she has extra demand this year. That is, of course, a repercussion of the ongoing war. We're 1 week before Pesach, nearly 4 weeks into the war. A lot of people have been laid off, unfortunately. A lot of businesses are suffering. And of course, those who suffer most are those in need. Prices, not surprisingly, because of the situation, have also started to creep up. So we're doing the best on our ability to provide as much fruits and vegetables and cooked meals and all other types of items to people in need for this Pesach.
I know Leket 70 years, and there is like a family for me and for all the people who take it, the vegetable and the fruit, and they do big, big things for the other people who need it. And we believe that if you give to somebody, the God give you back.
People talk about farm to table. What could be nicer than giving the needy this high quality stuff? This literally came from a farm in the last 24 hours, and now it's going to make its way to someone's Seder table. Today, we'll have about 300 families that will be coming to this site to pick up produce in order to make sure that their Seder table looks like so many of ours. Look at these onions. As good as you can buy in any store, the finest stores in the land will stock these onions. There's a bit of overproduction right now. Prices have dropped, and so farmers have been generous enough for the holiday to donate massive amounts of onions to Leket. And we are proud that we will distribute them to over 400,000 needy Israelis between now and the Passover holiday. We're making an extra push this year before Pesach because of the demand and because we want to give people respect when they come to their Seder table. But it's important to note, we don't view ourselves at Leket as an emergency food distribution organization. We're a food distribution organization every day of the year. But now, in a time of war, in a time of emergency, in a time of extra demand, we will do whatever it takes to make sure that those who count on us get what they need. So I hope those who see this can help out, come to our rescue, and make sure that no matter how long this war continues, we'll be able to do what we need to do.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Sivan Raviv, and coming up in today's newscast. The U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah takes hold as Trump imposes limits on Israeli strikes and pushes for historic talks in Washington. And despite the ongoing truce, 2 IDF soldiers are killed and others wounded in fatal attacks in southern Lebanon. The 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is set to expire this week, and talks may resume even as Hormuz tensions and mixed messages from Tehran raise doubts. The U.S. ordered a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah took effect at midnight on Thursday night following an announcement by President Donald Trump, and it's largely been holding. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Lebanese President Aoun are calling it an opportunity toward a lasting agreement. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
The Trump-declared Israel-Lebanon ceasefire is due to expire around Monday, April 27th, unless it's extended or modified in ongoing negotiations. Posting the announcement, Trump raised eyebrows in Israel when he announced that Israel has been banned from bombing Lebanon. The U.S. will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner, he wrote. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. President Trump called the ceasefire a potentially historic moment and plans to host Prime Minister Netanyahu and Lebanese President Aoun at the White House for talks aimed at a permanent peace agreement.
יש לנו הזדמנות לעשות הסכם שלום היסטורי עם לבנון. הנשיא טראמפ מתכוון להזמין אותי ואת נשיא לבנון כדי לנסות לקדם את ההסכם. בשיחות השלום האלה יש לנו 2 דרישות יסודיות. 1, פירוק חיזבאללה מנשקו. 2, הסכם שלום בר קיימא, שלום מתוך עוצמה. כדי להשיג את הפסקת האש, חיזבאללה התעקש על 2 תנאים. התנאי הראשון, ישראל חייבת לסגת מכל שטחה של לבנון, עד הגבול הבינלאומי. תנאי שני, הפסקת אש במתכונת שקט תמורת שקט. לא הסכמתי לא לזה ולא לזה, ואכן 2 התנאים האלה אינם מתקיימים.
Lebanese President Aoun said the ceasefire should move to permanent agreements.
أما الآن نقف جميعا أمام مرحلة جديدة هي مرحلة الانتقال من العمل على وقف إطلاق النار إلى العمل على اتفاقات دائمة تحفظ حقوق شعبنا ووحدة أرضنا وسيادة وطننا.
With the ceasefire clock ticking toward its April 27th deadline, both sides now face a critical test of whether the U.S. brokered pause can be turned into a lasting political breakthrough or whether it will unravel back into conflict.
While the fragile ceasefire has been ordered in Lebanon, there were heavy casualties among Israeli forces deployed north of the border. There's also movement south of many Lebanese civilians trying to return to their homes in southern Lebanon near the Israeli border. ILTV's Devo Klein reports on the first days of the Lebanon ceasefire.
Amid the ceasefire, 2 soldiers have been killed and about a dozen wounded in 2 separate incidents in southern Lebanon. The fallen were named as Reserve Sergeant First Class Lidor Porat, 31, from Ashdod.
Porat was killed and 9 others were wounded, including one seriously, after being hit by an explosive device in southern Lebanon yesterday. In a separate incident, warrant officer in the reserves Barak Khalfon, aged 48 from Adi, was killed while conducting a search of a building in the southern Lebanese village of Jebain for weapons when the explosive device detonated. The blast killed Khalfon and wounded 3 other troops. The IDF says it remains on high alert and fully ready to resume fighting in Lebanon if the current fragile week-long ceasefire collapses or expires without extension on April 22nd. From the moment the ceasefire took effect, thousands of displaced Lebanese families have been gradually flooding southern highways this weekend, attempting to return home. Israeli forces remain deployed in southern Lebanon and continue to warn civilians not to return to frontline areas, despite mass movement of people heading back to the south. Defense Minister Israel Katz said that Israel will remain in its frontline positions in southern Lebanon.
צה"ל אוחז וימשיך לאחוז בכל המקומות אותם תיאר וכבש. מהלך התמרון הקרקעי לתוך לבנון ותקיפת החיזבאללה בכל רחבי לבנון השיגו הישגים רבים, אבל עדיין לא הושלמו. היעד אותו הגדרנו, פירוק החיזבאללה מנשקו באמצעים צבאיים או מדיניים, היה ונותר יעד המערכה לא אנו מחויבים, כאשר כעת נוצר גם מנוף מדיני משמעותי, במעורבות ישירה של נשיא ארצות הברית ומחויבותו ליעד הזה, תוך הפעלת לחץ על ממשלת לבנון.
A second round of U.S.-Iran peace talks could take place this week in Islamabad, possibly on Tuesday. Trump confirmed his envoys are en route for talks tomorrow night and that a deal may be near, but also threatened that if a deal is not reached, the U.S. will knock out every power plant and bridge in Iran. At the same time, a crisis is brewing as Iran reimposed a closure on the Strait of Hormuz. ILTV's Kalev Ben David has the latest.
While Washington has not officially confirmed the time or place of a second meeting between U.S. and Iranian officials, President Donald Trump says Tehran has already agreed to give up its highly enriched uranium and expressed confidence that a deal can be reached in the coming days. Trump also claims Iran has agreed to stop funding Hamas and Hezbollah and to hand over its enriched uranium stockpile as part of a potential agreement.
We had to do something. We had to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. And we're at that. They've agreed to that. They've totally agreed to that. They've agreed to almost everything. So maybe if they can get to the table, there's a difference. They agree. They got to get to the table with a pen. We'll have that over with.
Iranian officials said the president's posts and comments were misleading.
American side tweets a lot, talks a lot, sometimes confusing, sometimes contradictory. In the same statement, he said other things as well. So I don't want to judge what he means. It is up to American people should decide whether his statements are consistent and are in accordance with the international law or not.
The current 2-week ceasefire is set to expire on Wednesday, April 22nd, coinciding with Israel's Independence Day. A Pakistani mediator says back-channel talks have shown progress, with a memorandum of understanding possible in the near term and a broader deal potentially within 60 days. Meanwhile, the crisis is continuing in the Strait of Hormuz after Iran's IRGC Navy once again extended a full closure of the Strait of Hormuz, declaring the waterway shut until the U.S. lifts its blockade on Iranian ports and shipping. The Revolutionary Guard says even the previous safe transit corridor is closed, warning that any vessel violating restrictions could be targeted. This marks a sharp reversal after Iran briefly said ships could pass through with coordination and a possible toll, only to reinstate full control hours later. Reports say 2 Indian-flagged ships were fired on while trying to transit the strait. Meanwhile, U.S. President Trump is holding talks with top advisors on the crisis as Iran reimposes restrictions despite ongoing diplomatic contacts. The situation has been described as Hormuz whiplash, with rapid reversals causing major disruption to global shipping. The shift began with Iran opening the strait during a ceasefire window, followed by a brief resumption of tanker traffic before Iran's military reasserted full control and at least 20 vessels turned back. Trump says Iran got a little cute with the move, but insists talks with Tehran are working out really well and remain active.
And joining me now to discuss the latest current events is Joe Truzman, a senior research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and an editor at the Longboard Journal. Thank you, Joe, for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start by asking you, the Lebanon ceasefire and the Iran ceasefire, are they tied together in your opinion?
They are, in the sense that Iran wants to link them as much as possible. The reason I say this is because, of course, Hezbollah is Iran's chief proxy in the region. And what Iran is attempting to do, and has been attempting to do since over the last weeks, right, is impose a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Hezbollah, on basically what is Iran's terms. All right, why are they doing this? Because they're trying to protect Hezbollah. Now we know that over the last more than 2 years now, Israeli the IDF has been striking Hezbollah infrastructure, Hezbollah personnel, and Hezbollah has been suffering. So what Iran is, again, attempting to do is to protect Hezbollah and achieve a ceasefire on its terms. Why? Again, because Iran is attempting to support Hezbollah and make sure that it can regenerate, rearm, and fight again in another day against the Israelis, unfortunately. So this is what I think they've been attempting to do over the last weeks.
Okay, so now we're seeing this ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, but still deadly incidents are happening on the ground. We have 2 IDF soldiers who were killed just this weekend. How stable is this truce really?
Right. I think one can argue that this ceasefire is in name only right now. Nevertheless, it's a ceasefire, all right? It's important. Now, see, I think that the problem here more than anything is, of course, Lebanon, the Lebanese government, Israel, the United States, they want peace. Israel wants a secure northern border. But the problem is that Lebanon, specifically the Lebanese government, isn't able to hold back Hezbollah, all right? Hezbollah does not want a Lebanon and peace with Lebanon and Israel, all right, between Lebanon and Israel, and that's a problem. So I think this is an issue we're going to be seeing over the next weeks. If there are talks between Lebanon and Israel regarding peace, Hezbollah is going to do everything it can, right, to thwart this. We've already seen it in the past, and I think we're going to see it in the next days and weeks. So a lot to look at here, a lot to see. But again, I think the Lebanon and Israel peace negotiations is a great thing, but Hezbollah is going to attempt to thwart it, I have no doubt.
So we are seeing these rare direct talks between Israel and Lebanon, and even Trump saying that he hopes to invite both Netanyahu and Aoun to Washington to continue these direct talks. How significant is that in your opinion? Can it actually lead to any real change on the ground? We know that it's been difficult for the Lebanese government to follow through on any kind of disarming of Hezbollah, but how significant is the fact that they're actually meeting face to face?
It's always significant, I think, when Lebanese officials talk to or meet face to face with Israelis, right? It's notable, it's great, but we need changes on the ground. We need to see changes on the ground. Post-2024 ceasefire in Lebanon, we observed the Lebanese government make some meaningful moves against Hezbollah, which is great news, but they didn't do the job, right? So I think there's going to be some doubts on the Israeli side about what the Lebanese government can do, but nevertheless, meetings between the Lebanese government and the Israelis is great, but as I said earlier, Hezbollah is not going to like it, and they're going to make that known to the public. So again, in the next days and weeks, we have to see what happens with Hezbollah and the Lebanese government when there are talks between all parties.
Now, the residents of the Israeli north, many of them naturally are very upset that the ceasefire went into effect, that the job didn't get done just yet, that, putting them at great risk. So now Israel wants Hezbollah disarmed, but realistically, is that even possible without a much larger conflict?
Right. Yes, I think, unfortunately, the Israeli military, as far as its actions, let's say post-2020, October 7th, 2023, specifically against Hezbollah, has done a great deal of damage to Hezbollah, but that type of action, military action against Hezbollah, is limited. I think, as you said, it would involve a significant war, but to meaningfully disarm Hezbollah, I think the Lebanese people, the Lebanese government, is ultimately the deciding factor here. They are the ones that have to do it. They can receive the support, of course, from the IDF, but at the end of the day, it has to be done by Lebanon, the people of Lebanon. So are they willing to do it? Do they want to do it? Can that happen? That's, of course, a different question. But maybe something comes out of these peace talks between the Lebanese government and Israel over the coming days and weeks.
Well, we'll surely keep following. Joe Truzman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Buying real estate in Israel from abroad requires experience, trust, and the right guidance. Aliyah.il is a trusted real estate company specializing in helping international buyers navigate the Israeli property market with clarity and confidence. You will work directly with Eliyahu Kleinman, a dedicated representative of Aliyah.il, who will personally manage each step of the process, from property search to final closing, ensuring everything is handled professionally and efficiently. From Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Ra'anana to Netanya, the right property is closer than it seems. Aliyah.il, trusted guidance every step of the way.
With fragile ceasefires now holding with both Iran and Lebanon, beginning last night, the Home Front Command has eased all restrictions nationwide on sports and cultural events in Israel. The decision means full activity with the public returning to stadiums, performance venues, and events without wartime limitations. The announcement comes just days before Israel's Memorial Day and Independence Day commemorations, coming on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. Wednesday, April 22nd, is when the ceasefires in both Iran and Lebanon are due to expire. Heavy incoming rocket fire continued until the final moments before the Thursday midnight ceasefire. Amid those final salvos, a 17-year-old girl and 25-year-old man were seriously wounded in the city of Carmiel, while another civilian in Nahariya was moderately injured. The Lebanon ceasefire has drawn mixed reactions inside Israel, with mayors of northern Israeli cities warning the agreement does not yet guarantee security for border communities. Northern residents expressed a range of opinions. Let's take a listen.
האמת שאני כליכודניק וחבר מרכז מאוד 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 מאוכזב מהפסקת האש. ברור לנו שזה לא יחזיק, זה א', ב', אני יודע שביבי אין לו ברירה. אחרי מה שקיבלנו מארצות הברית, את החיבוק הגדול ואת התמיכה במלחמה מול איראן ובכלל, אי אפשר להגיד לטראמפ, אנחנו מתנגדים להפסקת האש, אבל ברור לכולם שזה לא יחזיק.
מה הפסקת האש? הרי אנחנו כבר מכירים את זה 30 שנה אחורה. נתנו להם הרבה פעמים הזדמנויות לנסה ולנצל את ההזדמנויות לשלום, לאחווה, להיות ביחד. הם לא מחפשים שלום, הם מחפשים להשמיד אותנו. הם אומרים את זה. אנחנו רוצים אותם בים. אז איך אפשר לבוא ולהתגונן במצבים כאלה שהילדים שלנו במקלטים?
אנחנו לא אנשים של מלחמה, אנחנו אנשים של שלום, ורוצים לחיות בשלום. ואנחנו רוצים את לבנון במיוחד שתהיה בשלום איתנו. ומה אני אגיד לך? זה מה שיש לי להגיד, ולכיף, לקום ליום חדש, בלי טילים, בלי הרוגים של חיילים, בלי פצועים, ובעזרת השם שהחיילים יחזרו בשלום לבתים.
Deep underground in Jerusalem, in fortified operating rooms, intensive care units, and maternity wards, doctors and nurses urgently treat patients, even while rockets are flying and sirens are blaring. Hadassah built these hospitals and is working to rapidly expand these underground facilities. Additional hospital beds and 6 advanced operating rooms are urgently needed. Please go to hadassah.org. Make a gift that helps Hadassah continue its long-standing, life-changing support of the Israeli people. Thank you.
Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa says talks with Israel on a potential security agreement are progressing, but with great difficulty. Sharaa said Damascus is serious about reaching a security agreement that preserves regional stability, but claimed negotiations are stalled over Israel's insistence on maintaining a military presence on Syrian territory, as Israel maintains control of a buffer zone along the border following the fall of the Assad regime. The sides have held multiple rounds of direct talks in recent months under U.S. mediation and have even agreed to establish an intelligence sharing mechanism as part of efforts to reach a broader security understanding. Sharaa expressed support for U.S. efforts to end the war in Lebanon.
نحن نبارك الجهود التي قام بها الرئيس ترامب بإيقاف الحرب الدائرة في لبنان ونأمل أن ننتقل إلى مرحلة أخرى اللي هو إصلاح المسارات في المنطقة بأن لا تتكرر مثل هذه الحروب.
After weeks of tensions between Israel and Iran and Lebanon, Israelis are once again grappling with the impact of war. One counseling center in Bet Shemesh is working quietly to restore hope and resilience. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has more.
In the heart of Beit Shemesh in central Israel, the Emunat Rachel Family Counseling Center opens its doors each day to individuals and families carrying invisible wounds. One of 11 World Immunotherapy centers across Israel, the Beit Shemesh branch sees around 110 individuals and families every week. Its 20 therapists offer talk therapy, art therapy, play therapy, family counseling, and EMDR trauma treatment, often at a fraction of the cost charged privately. Director Nancy Chernovsky, who has led the center for more than 2 decades, says the goal is simple: to restore strength where it has been shaken.
We try to help people reconnect with their resilience, with their inner strength.
Beit Shemesh is one of Israel's most diverse cities, home to veteran Israelis, new immigrants, ultra-Orthodox and modern Orthodox families. The center serves them all, ensuring no one is turned away because of financial hardship. Single parents pay reduced fees, and many women rebuilding their lives after abusive marriages receive deeply subsidized support. Since October 7th, the need has only grown. Anxiety, grief, displacement, and trauma have affected families across the community. Staff members volunteered to support parents, and spouses of soldiers worked with evacuees from the south and treated families coping with loss. Chernovsky says even in the darkest moments, she witnesses something remarkable.
The thing that I love the most is seeing the resilience of people and how they overcome childhood trauma and get out of abusive situations, and it gives me a lot of inspiration.
The center, like many of Emuna's other facilities, also runs support groups, specialized family therapy for divorced parents and children, and art therapy programs that give teenage girls a safe way to express painful emotions. Emuna relies on contributions from abroad to keep these centers operating and therapy accessible. For Chernovsky, the work is deeply personal and deeply hopeful.
It's just really a gift that we can give people.
In a country still healing, that gift may shape not only individual lives, but the emotional future of Israeli society itself.
And the war-delayed Jerusalem Marathon took place in the capital this weekend as thousands of athletes from all over the country traveled to Jerusalem amid the fragile ceasefire with Iran. Due to the extreme heat and haze, the full marathon could not be run for health reasons. Thousands of runners still took part along routes near Jerusalem's old city walls, with the 10-kilometer race launched by freed hostage Ron Braslavsky. The event was originally scheduled for late March, but was then postponed due to the Iran war. The half marathon, which began early in the morning to avoid peak heat, was won by former Israeli Olympian Haim Ro-Alameh, while Tamir Birkia won the women's race. Medical teams reported one runner in serious conditioning from a heat stroke and treated more than a dozen others for dehydration and exhaustion. Despite the challenges, the event went ahead as a symbol of a partial return to normalcy amid the ongoing security situation. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies and partly rainy showers are expected in the north of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 14 degrees Celsius or 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 67 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's at ILTV_Israel on all platforms. You can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching. As war continues, one organization is stepping in to support Holocaust survivors ahead of Passover. Kolel Chabad is the oldest Jewish charity known for helping the needy and supporting them. They now have a special campaign to help Holocaust survivors for the Passover holiday, especially during these turbulent times during this war with Iran. Joining us now from New York is Zalman Duckman, Executive Director of Kolel Chabad. Thank you for joining.
Hey, how are you, Sivan?
Good, thank you. As good as could be.
Thank you for having me.
So we're heading into Passover next week during a time of war. What are you seeing on the ground when it comes to Holocaust survivors right now?
We're exactly 7 days away from the Seder. For millions of people throughout Israel will be making a Seder. We don't know if those Seders are going to take place with people alone in shelters, or maybe by some miracle together they'll be able to, together with family. Kol Chabad is responsible for 16,000 Holocaust survivors, making sure that they have food, making sure that they get fresh meals delivered. Those that many of them have home health aides that unfortunately the home health aides are unable to show up now, so they're alone, delivering hot meals every single day to thousands of Holocaust survivors. But just the thought of having a Holocaust survivor sitting alone the night of Pesach, a night that's supposed to be about freedom, of remembering miracles, and each of them endured so much that it is impossible to imagine that they should be alone without the Pesach provisions. So we have set up what is called Pack a Seder, where we're packing a Seder to go with matzah and grape juice and Haggadah. Many of them, most probably the Haggadah will be in Russian. Many of these Holocaust survivors, as a child, remembers the trauma of being in shelters when they were children, and it's extremely hard for them. And we have to do the best we can to make sure each and every single one gets delivered a pack a Seder for them to go, to take them wherever they are. We have thousands of volunteers in Israel now planning how we're going to deliver, and we're going to begin delivering right after this Shabbat to each of them, that they should have the provisions for Passover.
So you're assisting in providing food packages, hot meals. Is it also financial aid?
Yes, Kol Chabad is the oldest continuously operating charity in Israel, established in 1788 by the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe. And we've been helping the poor and needy in Israel ever since then. The method we use has changed. Something unique about Kol Chabad, especially when it comes to Holocaust survivors, we don't wait for them to reach out to us. We call them, we're in regular contact with them. People need to understand that we help them all year and all the time, so not just now. Most times they have our food card, where they shop using our food card. Now they're scared to leave. They're scared to leave their home, even if they and for the Seder, there's a lot more expenses. So we're going to be delivering that. And this is an opportunity for anyone around the world that feels the passion. They want to do something. You could participate in a Seder of a person that may be alone. And just the image of Holocaust survivors celebrating Seder alone in a shelter is just heart-wrenching. Could you imagine how much worse it would be if they wouldn't have matzah or grape juice or a Seder plate or other provisions? So anyone, wherever they are, it's very simple, packaseder.com, and we could deliver on your behalf. It just costs about $36. We have a lot of college students and high school students that are out of school anyways, volunteering to make the deliveries. And it's really a great opportunity. It's also a great representation of the international community coming together. Kol Chabad relies very much on donations from the international community. We also work in partnership with the IFCJ and with the Claims Conference and with local municipalities. So we work very closely with the other those in this space. But it's really a unique opportunity to see from all over the world how many people care and how passionate people are to help others at this time.
Well, Zalman Duckman, thank you very much. This is great work that you guys are doing, and hopefully it will make some people very, very happy during challenging times.
We hope it shouldn't be necessary. We would rather them go into community seders in our soup kitchens or all that. But it seems it's not on the menu.
Doing the best you can under the circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and have a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Thank you. Happy Passover.
The United States is infiltrated by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and here is how. Welcome back to Axis of Truth. I'm Emily Schrader, and today I'm exposing how the regime is manipulating the American public through a complex network of organizations right on American soil. For weeks on this show, I've been exposing how the media, public figures, celebrities, activists are repeating the same framing, the same talking points, the same distortions that benefit the Islamic Republic of Iran, whether or not they realize it. This is part of an immense psychological warfare effort by the regime for many decades already, and they're playing the long game. Today, I'm going to expose to you how they're doing it inside of the United States. Now, a new report from NUFTI, the National Union for Democracy in Iran, details this long-term strategy by the regime to establish durable influence and manipulation of public opinion inside the United States. Not through traditional espionage, but through institutions, religious centers, schools, nonprofits, and community organizations that operate legally, consistently, and over generations. Now, at the center of this network is the ILTV Foundation, a New York-based nonprofit that owns a 36-story building on Fifth Avenue, a revenue-generating asset that's funded dozens of affiliated organizations across the country. Now, court filings and public reporting have described this foundation as operating under the direction of the Islamic Republic. And through that funding, it's helped build a network that spans multiple states and institutions, and one that's even shaping future generations of Americans for the worse. Now, this foundation itself has acknowledged supporting more than 35 organizations across the United States, including the Islamic Education Center in Potomac, something detailed in the report from NUFTI. Idara-e-Jafariya is what it's called in Maryland, and it's part of a broader network as well of mosques, schools, youth programs in states like Virginia, Michigan, and Texas. And that's just what's disclosed that we know about. This model is not unique to the United States either. The regime has used very similar foundations and charitable structures in the UK as well. And that's something that I will be exposing more about in detail in the future. But what you're seeing here is a strategy that adapts to different legal systems while maintaining the same objective: exporting the Islamic Revolution of 1979 to the West. Exporting the death cult of Khomeinism. Now, this NUFTI report exposes the regime's replicable model, starting with an anchor property often funded or supported through organizations like ILTV, which provides financial stability and a permanent base. install clerical leadership that's trained in Iran by the regime, who then sets that ideological direction. And from there, you build out schools, youth programs, and community organizations that spread the ideology into daily life and into the next generations of the West. Not just religious practice, but education, social networks, and cultural activity. And you can see this model very clearly in the Washington, D.C. area, which the report identifies as the original test case. After an attempt by pro-Khomeini activists to take over the Islamic Center of Washington in 1981, a plot which failed, their strategy shifted. So instead of direct takeovers, the network started moving towards building parallel institutions that they could control and expand over time. From there, it only spread. On American campuses, for example, the Muslim Student Association's Persian-speaking group emerged as a key node. Now, according to FBI assessments and Senate testimony, this group has operated as an extension of the Islamic Republic itself, using the cover of a campus organization to monitor dissidents and disseminate propaganda, and even organize events that promote regime-aligned ideology. These are very similar tactics to what we've seen from the Muslim Brotherhood, also in the United States on campuses. This network has been operating since the 1980s with annual conferences, organized transport of students to protest, and direct lines back to officials that are connected to the Islamic regime. Now, FBI testimony also described this network as one of the Islamic Republic's primary methods that they rely on for intelligence and technical support inside the United States, including monitoring those dissidents and advancing the regime's objectives on American soil, whatever they may be. Now, from campuses, the regime's method expands into communities. Take Maryland, for an example. In Maryland, the Islamic Education Center in Potomac was established using Alavi Foundation support and combined a mosque with a full-time K-12 school on the same property. That structure allows the Khomeinist ideology to be reinforced daily through classrooms, peer networks, and youth programming, not strictly religious services. The center and its associated school received at least $3.6 million in funding from the Alavi Foundation, which is what allows this model from the Islamic Republic to scale and to sustain itself over time. Now, in Virginia, this network also connects to figures like Abu Fazl Nahidian, who was involved in pro-Khomeini organizing in the U.S. for decades and whose network centers around institutions like the Manassas Mosque, as well as earlier ties to the Islamic Education Center in Potomac and Iranian student networks that operate in Washington, D.C. Now, that same ecosystem intersects with the only known Iranian-directed assassination on U.S. soil when Ali Akbar Tabataei was shot in Maryland by Daoud Salahuddin, who was connected to Nahidian's network and operated out of an Iranian student center in Washington before fleeing back to Iran, where he remains today. Now, that same Manassas Mosque that has continued along that path, as this report details, has hosted numerous events marking the Islamic Revolution, has displayed imagery associated with the regime and its leadership, and just a few weeks ago, they held a Ramadan iftar for remembrance of the now-dead terrorist leader, Ali Khamenei, who they referred to as our leader in the United States. Decades later, the regime's network has only expanded, with those mosques and others like it being funded from the same structure and public promotion of regime-aligned positions, including support for Hamas, praise for IRGC figures with American blood on their hands, and more. This is what long-term infrastructure looks like. And before some Jew-hating crank starts saying, well, what about Israel? Don't they fund schools in America? No. And that's despite the fact that Jewish schools in America are obscenely expensive. The state of Israel does not provide support or services or indoctrination, anything close to the way that this death cult of Khomeinism has and is for many decades already. And now let's take a look at Michigan. In Dearborn, roughly 40% of the population is Muslim, and actually mostly Shia. And you don't have just one institution. You have a dense ecosystem of mosques, schools, youth programs, and media initiatives that reinforce one another and really honestly normalize anti-Semitic, anti-American, and pro-terror narratives as part of daily life. For example, in 2020, following the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, a commander responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American service members, the Islamic Center of America in Michigan hosted a vigil praising him, with senior clerics crediting him with striking fear into the enemies of Islam, including the United States.
Who was this general that his presence brought hope to the marginalized and those who were afraid, and brought hatred and fear to the enemies of Islam, particularly United States?
That's an American institution publicly glorifying a man responsible for killing American soldiers. Expanding west in Texas, this model is running across multiple metro areas, including Houston and Dallas, where anchor institutions support full-time schools, youth networks, and outreach programs designed to translate that regime ideology into language that resonates with broader American audiences, including non-Muslims. And this is where the whole effort of the regime starts to connect directly to what we're seeing today on the ground. The regime is extremely effective at identifying social divisions in the West and exploiting them to their advantage, hyper-focusing on perceived grievances of the West and building bridges with radical left groups and even increasingly mainstream groups when they see the chance, such as with Israel. The IRGC and its tentacles are, quite frankly, masters at making marginalized groups feel like they have shared goals, when in fact they often have opposite goals, such as the LGBTQ movement, which suddenly promotes Palestine without understanding the only thing that Palestinians hate more than Jews, statistically speaking, according to Pew, is gays. Now, of course, we also saw it and see it today when student groups organize pro-regime protests that portray the Islamic Republic and its terror proxies as resistance, blame Jews for all the faults of the world, and sometimes even chant death to America and burn American flags, like we saw with the student anti-Israel encampments after October 7th. The Islamic Republic will attach itself to a social issue and artificially amplify the outrage over the issue, especially in media and social media, all in order to drum up dissatisfaction within American culture and society. We saw it this past month with the disproportionate outrage over a strike on an IRGC base that had a school within its perimeter where dozens of children died. Yet there is little to no public knowledge or understanding of the fact that the regime itself killed hundreds of Iranian children during protests just a number of days earlier. This week, we see it again as economic talking points dominate the conversation when people are conditioned to prioritize gas prices over human lives, which is exactly why figures like Ghalibaf are publicly trolling the United States about oil prices on social media, which the entire Iranian population is cut off from. Yeah, the internet is still off. The reality is that the regime knows what resonates and they also know what divides. And we have a major problem on American campuses. Take a look at what happened at Swarthmore campus this week.
Take another soldier out! Take another soldier out! Iran, you make us proud! Iran, you make us proud!
So students openly cheering for Hezbollah, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization, and cheering for the killing of American soldiers. Really? Now, what this report from Nufti makes clear is that this isn't a handful of bad actors. It's a system deliberately built over decades across multiple states with dozens of institutions, millions of dollars in funding, and direct links back to an illegitimate terrorist regime in Iran. And this is the end result. A network that moves ideas through institutions and normalizes extremism through community structures and exploits the weaknesses of open societies to turn them against themselves. It's time to wake up and fight back against this abuse of our values as Americans or as any person who believes in freedom, equality, and liberal values. It's clear that we are under assault. And now I want to talk about an example from this week that proves exactly why what we just talked about is so critical right now. Because what we saw this week around the ceasefire between the Islamic Republic and the U.S. is not a diplomatic miscommunication. It's a real-time example of the same kind of subversion and narrative manipulation that we just talked about. When President Trump announced the ceasefire, he referenced 10 points that were under discussion for the talks. But almost immediately, the Islamic Republic leaked its own version of events to the international media, and through its media arms, a list of 10 points that were presented to the world as if they were a part of agreed upon deal, even though they weren't the same 10 points that were approved. And in many cases, some of these points weren't even a part of any serious negotiation between the two parties. On cue, the Western media immediately ran with it. Public figures ran with it, politicians ran with it, and suddenly you had an entire global conversation built around terms that didn't exist that made the US look incredibly weak, like President Trump had failed in his war objectives. This entire effort was a psyop, and not even a sophisticated one. This was a petty attempt to stir up chaos, shift blame, and get the whole world to start condemning Israel for something that it was never even a part of. Because one of the key elements that they inserted into this fake framework was Lebanon, specifically the idea that a ceasefire somehow included limitations on Israeli action in Lebanon, despite the fact that Israel was not a party to these talks and had not been consulted on any of it. And again, last I checked, Lebanon is not in Iran. And if Iran is negotiating on behalf of Lebanon, that's not a part of the story, that's the entire problem. But once that idea was out there, everything else followed. Suddenly you have people asking, why is Israel violating terms that don't exist? You have world leaders calling for restraint based on conditions that were never agreed to. And the entire conversation shifts away from the regime and onto Israel, which is exactly what this was designed to do by the regime. The White House had to come out and clarify that these 10 points were not part of any agreed deal, and Lebanon was indeed not a part of the ceasefire. And then the regime doubled down by adding another claim in the international media about unfreezing assets, which, again, not agreed to, but by that point it almost doesn't matter because the narrative has already taken hold. The talks started, the talks failed, and now we're watching the next phase with the Strait of Hormuz. But if we don't learn from this, it'll just be the same thing all over again. And what's honestly more concerning than the regime doing this is how many world leaders just went along with it without even understanding what they're talking about. You had members of Congress and European leaders openly calling for a ceasefire in Lebanon without even knowing what the terms were, who was involved, or why there was even a conflict in Lebanon in the first place. Leaders like Keir Starmer, the Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper, Emmanuel Macron, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres all came out demanding Israel respect a non-existent ceasefire in Lebanon because a terrorist dictatorship demands it, even though that same dictatorship doesn't govern Lebanon, doesn't represent Lebanon, and has spent decades undermining Lebanon through Hezbollah. And this is where you see the Islamic regime colonialism in action. In Lebanon, we see a system where a foreign power has inserted itself into another country through force, through proxies, and through violence, and has effectively created a parallel structure of control inside of that country. Now, they've done this in Lebanon through Hezbollah, and they've also done it in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. And in each case, the result is the same. Weakened governments destabilize societies and populations that are caught in the middle with tens of thousands dead. Now, after doing that for decades, they expect to be treated as a legitimate stakeholder in negotiations about those same countries. And the international community is playing along. Why is the world allowing this international bully to do this? This regime has killed more Muslims over time than any other actor in the region through these proxy wars. And yet when it comes time to push back, what we see is hesitation, excuses, and leaders that are clearly more concerned with avoiding problems than with actually solving them. And the reason for that is very, very simple. Europe are cowards. They are scared of escalation, and they're scared of economic consequences. They're also scared of their own domestic politics, and in that fear, they become completely spineless. They won't even defend the Strait of Hormuz, which they depend on far more than the United States, even when the United States is willing to do it with them as the strongest military in the world. No, they prefer to scapegoat Israel by demanding Israel stand down in Lebanon. This is not just failing their own people, it's also failing the Lebanese people and international law, because the Lebanese more than ever do not want Hezbollah controlling their country. We saw that this week when Israel agreed to direct negotiations, and Hezbollah responded by threatening the government and creating so much instability that Lebanon had to back out.
ولما حكينا بالتفاوض طلع البعض قال شو جايين من الدبلوماسية. بديله للبعض شو جايين من الحرب تبعك. صار عندنا فوق 1400 شهيد، فوق 4000 جريح. آلاف المنازل مدمرة، فوق 1,200,000 نازح عم بيعيشوا حياة صعبة. أي أفضل كان نطول بالنا ونروح على التفاوض ولا منروح على الحرب؟ لا، التفاوض مش تنازل والدبلوماسية مش استسلام. طيب نحن ليه ما هلأ بنقعد بنتفاوض لنوقف هالمآسي ونوقف هالنزف اللي عم بيعاني منه لبنان؟ لا، بدنا ننطر يصير الوضع أسوأ بكتير وساعتها منروح على التفاوض.
Exactly. So the Lebanese government that is willing to talk to Israel about a diplomatic solution is now being criticized by Hezbollah and threatened by Hezbollah to not do exactly that. They're lobbying against potential peace. And this is what the international community is protecting. A bullying terror proxy, actively sabotaging democracy and efforts for peace, a group that's literally threatening a coup in Lebanon. You are emboldening that? The irony here is that Israel is the only one willing to do the job of Europe and the international community for them. UN Resolution 1701 and 1559 require the disarmament of Hezbollah and require that it exist only north of the Litani River. Those resolutions have been in place for years. Billions of dollars have been spent on UN peacekeepers, UNIFIL, to enforce these resolutions, and none of it has ever worked. Hezbollah still armed, still embedded in the south, and still operating. The Lebanese army has repeatedly proven incapable of disarming Hezbollah, so Israel must, because it's Israel who has received 6,500 missiles from Hezbollah in the past 40 days. So when Israel takes action, it's not acting outside international law. It's acting in the vacuum created by the failure to enforce international law. Instead of acknowledging that, people are accusing Israel of war crimes. This is so far beyond a policy failure. It's a civilization committing suicide. And parts of the Democratic Party, some Republicans, and much of Europe are not just failing to stop it, they're helping it along. If we don't learn from all of this, if we continue to allow the Islamic Republic to shape the terms of our debates, then the next time this happens, and there will be a next time, we will watch the exact same playbook unfold all over again. And with that, let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly from this week. Kicking things off with the bad. There is a lot of it this week, but I have to start with one person because this perfectly captures the level of ignorance we're dealing with right now. This week, I ended up arguing on X with Martina Navratilova, the tennis player, which was not really something I had on my bingo card, but here we are. And what was striking about it was not just that she is wrong, it was how confidently wrong she is while speaking on something she clearly does not understand. Because she, like so many others this week, was repeating the claim that Israel's strikes in Lebanon were war crimes and that hundreds of civilians were killed, as if that was an established fact. Except that at the time those claims were being made, there was no way for anyone, including her, to know who was a civilian and who was not, because the numbers coming out of Lebanon don't distinguish between combatants and civilians. But what we do know is that of approximately 254 people killed in those strikes, Israel's confirmed that more than 180 were Hezbollah operatives, and Hezbollah itself has been putting out martyr posters nonstop, which means you're looking at a ratio of around 70% combatants in a wave of strikes that Israel didn't start. Israel didn't start this war. That is not a war crime. But here's the real problem for people like Martina, and she's not alone in this. People are throwing around terms like war crimes based on 20-second video clips of some kind of explosion without having the most basic understanding of what actually makes something a war crime. Because you don't know who the target was, you don't know what intelligence went into that strike, you don't know what precautions were taken, you don't know whether there was advance warning. You do not know whether it was a dual-use site or a strict military objective, and in most of these cases, the people commenting don't even know how to differentiate between a legal strike and an illegal strike, which is the principles of proportionality, distinction, and a military advantage to be gained by carrying out that strike. And yet, people are making crazy legal claims with absolute certainty as a form of performative moral narcissism. And we know because the same people who are now suddenly experts in international law have been completely silent on the Islamic Republic's crimes against its own people, from mass executions to the slaughter of children to the massacre of more than 40,000 protesters. But when Israel acts against a terrorist organization, suddenly Everybody's a lawyer. And that should really tell you everything that you need to know. This isn't about law or civilians. This is about people wanting to feel morally superior without actually doing the work of understanding what they're talking about. And in the process, they're not just misinforming people, they're actually reinforcing the exact narratives that the Islamic Republic is trying to push. So no, Martina, you don't get to declare something a war crime from your phone after watching a clip on social media. That's not how this works. Stick to tennis. Jihadist propaganda doesn't suit you. And now for the ugly story of this week. This is one that's kind of hard to watch, and it should be, because what we just saw in Spain is not some random protest or something done in poor taste. It's something that echoes a very long and very dark history. This week, during an Easter celebration, a giant effigy of Prime Minister Netanyahu was paraded through the streets and during this Easter celebration, and then blown up in front of a crowd that included families and children, with people cheering as it happened. And if you think that looks uncomfortably close to public execution theater, you're not imagining it, because in Spain, that kind of spectacle has a history. This is a country where in 1391, waves of pogroms swept through Jewish communities, with thousands of Jews murdered in the streets by mobs, not quietly, not hidden, but publicly and violently. A country that then created the Spanish Inquisition, where Jews and converts, so-called conversos, were hunted, tortured, and executed in public ceremonies, where people were burned alive in front of crowds. This is a country that in 1492 issued the Alhambra Decree, that expelled tens of thousands of Jews from their homes, forcing them to convert or leave under threat of death. And way before that expulsion, many were already forced into conversion through violence, massacres, and social pressure, with entire communities destroyed. So when you see a crowd gathering during a religious holiday to watch a figure representing the only Jewish state in the world be publicly destroyed, this doesn't exist in a vacuum. It looks like something that's happened there before. And it's not happening in a vacuum today either, because under Pedro Sanchez, Spain has entered a new era of Jew hatred, where anti-Israel rhetoric has bled into something much uglier, where government tone, media framing, and public discourse have really created an environment where this kind of spectacle is not only possible, but accepted. And that should make people pay attention. And now finally, for the good story of this week, actually related to what I just spoke about, the US government finally revoked the green cards of multiple Iranian nationals with direct ties to the Islamic regime. And some of them were arrested by federal agents and are now in ICE custody, facing deportation. Finally! Now, one of them is Saeed Aissa Hashemi, who was living in the United States with his wife and child after being granted a green card through the diversity visa program. Hashemi is the son of Masume Ebtekar, better known as Screaming Mary, who was the English language spokesperson for the Iranian students who stormed the U.S. Embassy in 1979 and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. Now, according to the State Department, she didn't just defend the hostage takers. She actively helped produce propaganda, staging interviews where American hostages were pressured to claim that they were being treated well, while in reality they were being held in solitary confinement, blindfolded, starved, and subjected to beatings and mock executions. Now, she was the face of that crisis, going on international television, defending it, justifying it, spinning it for the world. And her son has been living in the United States freely and legally for years. The child of one of the most prominent propaganda figures from one of the most traumatic attacks on the United States in modern history, living here in the United States under a green card. Well, thanks to Marco Rubio this week, that status was terminated and he was taken into custody pending removal. And this isn't an isolated case. Days earlier, U.S. authorities also arrested Hamideh Soleimani Afshar, the niece of Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC commander responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American service members, along with her daughter after their green cards were revoked. Now, she was living in L.A., living a life of luxury, but also openly supporting the regime, even praising attacks on Americans while living on American soil. Now, as of now, this is at least the 5th case in recent weeks where individuals with ties to the Islamic Republic or its elite networks have had their statuses revoked or been blocked from entering the United States. Let's hope that this trend continues. And with that, we wrap up for this week on Axis of Truth, but we'll be back next week with more stories of what's actually happening across this region and how the war against the Islamic Republic is shaping up. As always, if there's a story you think we should be covering, you can reach out to me on social media at Emily K. Schrader or on Instagram at Emily in Tel Aviv. Otherwise, we'll see you next week here on Axis of Truth on JNS.
And moving on, Prime Minister Netanyahu is making a push to strengthen ties with two of Israel's leading supporters in Europe, Hungary and the Czech Republic. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Hungarian Prime Minister-elect Peter Magyar held a warm introductory call today, according to official statements. During the call, Magyar said he intends to maintain the close and strategic relationship between Hungary and Israel, and invited Netanyahu to attend a ceremony marking the 70th anniversary of the Hungarian uprising. Netanyahu welcomed the remarks and accepted the invitation, and in turn invited Magyar to a government-to-government meeting in Jerusalem. Netanyahu expressed confidence that the strong ties developed with outgoing Prime Minister Viktor Orban would continue under the new Hungarian leadership. The two leaders agreed that their foreign ministers will meet soon to discuss continued cooperation and the deepening of bilateral relations between Israel and Hungary. Later, Prime Minister Netanyahu met with Czech Foreign Minister Peter Masinka at the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. Netanyahu expressed appreciation for what he called the strong and enduring friendship between Israel and the Czech Republic, describing the relationship as rooted in a long and remarkable tradition between the two peoples. He thanked both the visiting foreign minister and the Czech leadership for their continued support of Israel, saying it reflects a deep historical partnership that has stood the test of time. Let's take a listen.
I want to thank you and, of course, Andrei Babiš for the great support that follows a very long tradition between the Czech people and the Jewish people. In the previous century, it proved to be a remarkably moral partnership that has been proven by time, and now we're trying to elevate it to an even higher status. I want to thank you for your friendship and for your integrity. So thank you and welcome to Jerusalem.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Lidar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel with the headline stories from across the region. Here are the latest developments. There's been a dramatic escalation in the Gulf just ahead of the second round of U.S.-Iran talks, which are due to take place in Islamabad tomorrow. A U.S. Navy destroyer has seized an Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. U.S. Central Command Monday morning said U.S. Marines departed the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli by helicopter and transited over the Arabian Sea to board and seize the Iranian-flagged Tuska. The Marines rappelled onto the vessel after a guided missile from the USS Spruance disabled the Tuska's propulsion. This after the commercial ship failed to comply with repeated warnings from the U.S. for over 6 hours. Washington claims the ship was under sanctions with a history of illegal activity and that its cargo is now being inspected. The incident unfolded in the Gulf of Oman just south of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply flows, and took place just 2 days before the 2-week ceasefire is set to expire. And despite the maritime incident, U.S. President Donald Trump insists U.S.-Iran talks will resume tomorrow in Pakistan, with White House envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff heading to Islamabad for negotiations. Trump warned that if Tehran does not agree to a deal, the consequences would be severe, saying the country could be blown up, and adding that potential targets include Iranian bridges and power plants. Trump said his demands include reopening the Strait of Hormuz and Iran giving up its highly enriched uranium. The president has expressed optimism, saying the concept of the deal is done and there is a very good chance of success. But while Trump says talks are on, Iranian officials have, according to the regime's official news agency, rejected the second round of talks Sunday night, and today, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman reiterated that Iran will not join the talks in Pakistan. Additionally, according to Reuters, differences over Iran's nuclear program still remain, and Tehran says its missile program is not open to negotiation, casting doubt on whether an agreement will be reached by the time the ceasefire expires on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Pakistan is reportedly exerting maximum pressure on Iran to ensure that talks do go ahead as scheduled tomorrow. So at this hour, it remains unclear whether talks will in fact be held in Islamabad and whether any real progress will be made towards advancing a deal. And turning now to Lebanon, where amid the fragile 10-day ceasefire, the IDF published a map showing its new forward defensive line. This as the IDF maintains a presence in southern Lebanon. The army says 5 IDF divisions alongside naval forces are operating south of the line to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure and prevent threats to northern Israeli communities. The map shows that troops have crossed the Litani River, a key geographic marker long associated with efforts to push Hezbollah forces northward, and are holding the strategic Beaufort Ridge. Defense Minister Katz says that troops will use full force to counter any threats to the IDF troops. And for some positive news, there was a warm diplomatic embrace in Jerusalem as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Argentina's President Javier Milei for a high-profile visit. The two leaders greeted each other with a hug, with Netanyahu joking about the similarity between Javier and the Hebrew word chaver, meaning friend, before giving a thumbs up to cameras. Netanyahu telling his guest, "It warms my heart that you're here." After their meeting, the two announced the launch of the Isaac Accords, aimed at strengthening ties between Israel and Latin America. Milei is also expected to take part in Israel's Independence Day ceremony, where he will light a torch tomorrow night. And earlier hours after landing, Milei headed straight to the Western Wall, the spiritual heart of the Jewish people, marking his third visit to Israel since taking office. And tonight, Israel prepares to mark Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, beginning at 8 p.m. Israel time. And that's all the news at this hour. I'm Ladar Lazi. Join us here every hour on The Hour at ILTV. Thanks for watching.
Everyone wants to know what is going on at the White House. Let's have a listen to what President Trump just said.
Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country.
Okay, so on the one hand, Mark, all right, so President Trump just said basically that the war is over. On the other hand, listen to another thing he said, and this time outside of the White House.
I can tell you that we've been called by the other side. They'd like to make a deal very badly, very badly.
What was the sticking point over? You said it was over nuclear.
It was over nuclear, very similar, yeah, very good. I guess you're listening. It's over the fact that they will never have a nuclear weapon. Iran, you marking it down? Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. I think they will agree to it. I'm almost sure of it. In fact, I am sure of it. If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal.
Before we get started, Mark, I'd like to tell our viewers that today is Wednesday, April 15th. And I know that some of you have said that it's really important that we stress that given the very busy news cycle that we're all in these days. Okay, so I'm Ruthie Bloom. I'm here in the JNS studio, and joining me remotely is my co-host, Mark Regev. So, Mark, what do you make of what President Trump said? Is this war over?
So, it's a good question, and I think it depends on how you define war. Is it possible that the high-intensity part is over? I don't know. The president has been surprising the world, and more importantly, he's been surprising the Iranians, which keeps them off balance. I mean, they thought they had the world on its choke point. They thought they had the world at their mercy because they control the Straits of Hormuz, and they thought that the whole world will come to them I even heard some commentators saying that this was as good as having a nuclear weapon because the whole world needed that oil coming out of the Straits. And what did President Trump do? He said, if you're going to blockade the Straits, I'm going to blockade the Straits. And in many ways, I think he's neutralized their ability to hold the cards, to hold all the cards. And I think it was a very clever move. And I would expect as this goes forward, we can probably expect more moves like this.
Well, absolutely. And, it's almost misleading to say that he blocked the Straits or the Strait of Hormuz. What he actually did was block all access points, all Iranian ports, so that the Islamic Republic cannot export oil and gas. And that's the source of its money. And he's actually choking them off. You're right. He said, you guys open the strait. And they were, the Islamic Republic regime was taking tolls. They said, no, they were holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage. And President Trump pulled a fast one on them. He said, oh, yeah, I'll show you. Who are you, you little dictators? No, not when I'm around. And so he blocked off access to Iran's ability to make any money. And that will, as it is, Iran's economy is really destroyed, and this will make it even worse. Now, but the question here is he pulling a fake out? On the one hand, he said, we're giving them 2 weeks ceasefire, and I believe that ends in next week at some point, maybe around the time of Israel's Independence Day. But he also said, no nukes. They cannot have nuclear weapons. They can't have enriched uranium. They can't have the nuclear dust, so to speak. And they cannot have the ability to enrich uranium, basically ever. Okay. And the people who came to negotiate with J.D. Vance, with Vice President J.D. Vance and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, left after 21 hours of meetings. J.D. Vance said, no, we made lots of progress. We made lots of progress, but basically our red line is no nukes. And they said no. Okay. Then there were these reports, which I think are total fake news, saying that America was going to agree to allow them in 20 years to start enriching uranium. But then that would have made this deal, so-called deal, not much different from Obama's JCPOA. So I didn't believe those reports and all that. But the bottom line is this. When you say the high-intensity aspect of the war may be over, right, we're not seeing missiles flying from Iran, and Israel and the U.S. are not launching attacks on Iran either. However, Israel has been bombarded daily, nightly, by Hezbollah missiles from Lebanon, mostly on northern Israel. But, Israel is a tiny, tiny country, and northern Israel is a huge portion of it. So I'd like you to address that issue of the separation of Hezbollah from the Islamic Republic, and tell me a little bit about what it just went on in Washington with regard to Lebanon and Israel.
So with your permission, Ruthie, I'll start with Iran. Well, you said that he's blockaded all the oil going out of the Iranian ports, and that's correct. And as you said very correctly also, that's their lifeline. Yes, what are they going to do if they can't sell their oil? And he, once again, he answered them, can you say tooth for tooth? He got straight in there and they said, you're doing it, so I can do it too. It's also not clear to me, but he obviously has an option, Ruthie, if he wants to blockade imports into Iran, right? Which gives him a huge trigger, a huge weapon to use there. Because if he can prevent goods going into Iranian ports, I mean, theoretically, I'm sure Iran is determined they don't grow everything they need for their own people. He has really the ability to restrict what can go in if he chooses to use that as well. It'll be very interesting. It's a standoff now because the Iranians have imposed their own blockade. He's imposed a blockade on them. And I would argue that the Iranians are going to increasingly suffer now because they can't, a lot of pressure on them from their friends, whether it's the Chinese or others, who will say to them, listen, this is not sustainable, right? If you can't get your oil out, the only reason we really like you is because of your oil. And if you can't get your oil out, that's a problem. And I think there'll be more and more pressure on the Iranians to compromise. And the question is, after, I presume they'll be meeting again, J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Kushner will be meeting again with the Iranian team in a second round of these talks. And the only serious question is, will they overcome the gaps and will there be able to be a solution? So I would like to tell you what my opinion is. And that is, number one, the most important issue in the talks is the nuclear issue. Because the minute you solve that, the issue of the Straits, everything else can fall into place. Of course, I'd like regime change. Of course, I'd like ballistic missiles. I'd also like proxies, but I believe in prioritizing. And the most important thing in here, I think President Trump is 100% correct. We've got to focus on the nuclear issue because that's the big one. Everything else is small compared to the nuclear issue. We cannot allow, as the president has repeatedly said, we cannot allow this regime to have nuclear weapons. Now, I don't think that what the Americans are talking about, what Trump is talking about, you expressed concern that this could just be another rehash of the JCPOA, Obama's failed nuclear agreement. And I would argue, no, it doesn't look like it's going that direction at all. Because first of all, the president is demanding the removal of all enriched uranium currently in Iran. Whether it goes to Russia or to somewhere else, it doesn't bother me, but all that uranium has to leave. In other words, when this process is over, Iran will have no enriched uranium. I understand the president is also very, very strong on they can't enrich new uranium. They can't enrich more uranium. And the minute you deal with those issues, I think you're dealing with their ability to make a bomb, and you've substantially prevented that from happening. Now, you expressed concern that the Americans have put this 20-year time...
No. Excuse me. Let me interrupt you. I said the fake news media said that. I said it's a fake report. Axios, the New York Times. No. I don't believe it precisely because it will just be another JCPOA. I do not believe it. The fake news media is spreading that.
So once again, if you get a time limit which is decades away, right? I would like no time limit at all, yes? But once again, I don't want any time limit at all. But I think if you start talking about something that's 50 years ago away, and that's a face-saver for the Iranians, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 50 years, yes, as far as that regime is going, I think you can play with that. Now, I don't want to play with that. I'd prefer something unequivocal. But if you're negotiating, I think that's the sort of issue where maybe you can give them something symbolic, like for the next 50 years. I don't like 20. 20 is too close. 20 passes very quickly. But I think if you can get a deal that actually, what was the problem with JCPOA, with Obama's deal? It actually never did what it was supposed to do. It never stopped them getting nuclear weapons. What Trump is actually talking about is stopping them getting nuclear weapons, and that's a crucial difference.
Okay, so here's the thing, Mark. Forget about this. A deal can be made if. No deal can be made with this regime. The minute any deal is made with any of the figures existing right now who have not been eliminated, assassinated, blitzed in airstrikes, anybody remaining standing is an enemy of the United States, certainly of Israel, of the West. And the only difference between those who are saying we should make a deal, such as the president Possession, he is furious that the team came back to Tehran with no deal. It's not that he's a moderate. The difference between the moderates and the so-called moderates and extremists is the moderates believe in faking out the West, the tenet of Islam that says you can lie. In fact, you're supposed to lie in order to get what you want. In the long term, you have patience. And the others who say, no, we don't even want to lie. We're waiting for the 12th imam and all of this, because they are all fanatics and they are all evil, part of the evil regime. And what I do believe is if you prevent them from having nukes and you prevent them from exporting their oil, there is no regime. And that's the beauty of it. You keep saying that I demand perfection. The regime will fall if it has no oxygen. And if it doesn't, and if it keeps being intransigent, I actually believe that we might go back to military means again.
I don't exclude that, Ruthie. I don't exclude that at all. I think it's quite possible to go back to military means. But I want to quote the two relevant leaders here. Netanyahu said publicly, he said they won't have nuclear enriched uranium. They won't have the ability to enrich more. He said that can be done through diplomacy, or that can be done through kinetic, warfare. We can destroy what they have. What's he saying, though? He's saying there is a diplomatic option. And when the president has sent this team headed by the vice president to negotiate with the Iranians, it's clear there are negotiations with the Iranian regime. To say you're against negotiations with the Iranian regime, that could be your opinion, and I can respect that. But that's not what's going on. There are negotiations with the Iranian regime, and the goal is to get a deal, unlike the JCPOA, a deal that actually does the job. Now, you can tell me you think that that's impossible, and the jury is out. All I'm saying, because I'm not sure the Iranians can agree to the sort of red lines that America and Israel believe are the bare minimum, of what needs to happen in these negotiations. But I don't rule it out up front. I think with all this, damage that we've inflicted on the Iranians, is it possible that they'll agree to things that they've never agreed to in the past? I think not. And if they hold out and we continue doing military action against them, maybe we're getting closer to that goal. I would argue you don't have to go back to all-out war. You could do something surgical. You could take over that island where all the oil goes. You could do a surgical use of ground forces here or there to take out clear targets. You can strike, yes, at different places without going back to full war. And of course, you have the option, if you have no choice, of going back to full war, which is continuing strikes against the Iranian regime. But it's clear to me that Trump prefers a negotiated solution if he can get it.
Okay, what he really wants is for the Islamic Republic to surrender. That's the deal. You surrender, we win, you lose. How about that for a deal? Second, now that brings us to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Why? Because the negotiations that are going on in Washington, it's unprecedented. Israeli negotiators and Lebanese negotiators meeting under the auspices of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And now, many people are saying, look, there's nothing they can do because they're negotiating with one another. But meanwhile, Hezbollah is firing rockets. Now here, if you take this as an example of what I think, yes, you have to have military and diplomatic. Now, in all this time with these talks, Israel has not stopped engaging in war against Hezbollah. And mainly the reason that these talks with Lebanon are taking place is because Lebanon has been unable or unwilling to defeat Hezbollah by itself. First of all, Hezbollah is deeply embedded in the Lebanese government and army, etc. But the Lebanese people are fed up, like the Iranian people. Now, we have to just say one word about the Iranian people that keep getting sidetracked in all these discussions about nukes and everything. This period of no missiles flying, it could be, for all you know, there's stuff going on behind the scenes to help the Iranian people get ready to come out to the streets. Now, they were slaughtered in the tens of thousands. And by the way, it's very urgent right now because, because there are mercenaries coming in, militias coming in from Iraq to help the regime gun down more, execute more of the innocent Iranian people. We cannot forget them. And let's not forget that Trump said at weeks before February 28th, when the war began, Trump said to the Iranian people, help is on the way. And yes, this is helping them. And even though they're living in utter, I would say, chaos, terror, they are still, so they want President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu to finish the job. They want them to keep firing on the regime figures. They do want that. And so I believe we have to help them. Just as now, we just had a Holocaust Remembrance Day. And we say never again, never again. And Jews have complained, rightly so, how the world turned its back on the Jewish people during the Holocaust. We cannot turn our backs on the Iranian people either.
Having said that, both the president and the prime minister have said it's the job of the Iranian people.
It is.
By weakening the regime, we're giving them an opportunity.
Correct.
And I don't think we can do it for the Iranian people instead of the Iranian.
No, but to weaken the Iranian regime, you can't make deals with it. Then you're right back to where you started.
Once again, you said that Trump wants them to capitulate, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wants an agreement. He said once unconditional surrender.
Surrender.
If they do surrender and give him everything that he wants on the nuclear issue, Ruthie, then you're going to have a deal with the Iranian regime.
Not just the nuclear issue. I'm sorry.
And
there are ballistic missiles. There are terror proxies. No, surrender doesn't mean just the nuclear issue, but although that's the key one, yes, because all the rest follows.
All I'm saying is, Ruthie, is that I want regime change in Iran. I think everyone wants to see regime change in Iran. Most of all, the people of Iran want to see regime change in Iran. I'm just saying I'm not sure you can build policy on that. I would remind you, and I've said it before on this program, that between the operation of June 25 and the outburst of the popular revolt against the government, it took 6-7 months. And so once this war is over, it doesn't mean regime change is off. Yes, regime change could still be on the cards, maybe even more so. I'm just not saying as a policy option, it's not saying we keep the war going until there's regime change. I don't think anyone is saying that. Will you allow me to address the Lebanon issue, though, which you raised quite correctly because it's in the news and it's important, but there's something very surrealistic about what's going on in Washington because, I mean, we're talking to the Lebanese government, and the Lebanese government says it wants to have good and peaceful relations with Israel, and can we solve all the problems? Why do I say surrealistic? Because the Lebanese government is weak. The Lebanese government is, unfortunately, that they say the right things, and increasingly they've been saying the right things recently. Do they have the ability to implement any of their nice statements? And here the question is very open. Because if we look at the facts, I mean, they took a decision, 3 weeks ago to expel the Iranian ambassador. They couldn't even do that. They couldn't even expel the Iranian ambassador. Now, they've made all these new laws and they've made the Iranian Revolutionary Guards against, they have to leave and Hezbollah has to disarm and all these things, but they don't have the power to push through. And so while we want peace in Lebanon, we have to understand that first of all, that they say the right things and they're meeting with us and they want to discuss peace is all very good. And we should, I always say, if an Arab country wants to make peace with Israel, let's talk. There's no reason to close the door. But we have to understand that Hezbollah is the real power, unfortunately, today inside Lebanon. And so Israel defeating Hezbollah militarily, I think, will create the conditions for peace between Israel and Lebanon. I think it also plays in with the Iranian issue, is that if Iran comes out of this conflict weaker, defanged, yes, weaker economically, weaker militarily, weaker politically, that means their ability to help Hezbollah reestablish itself will be much less, much, much less, which means that if we also, I think, strengthening the chance of a deal with Lebanon, but it all depends on defeating Hezbollah militarily, because without doing that, they hold the cards in Lebanon. You've got to take those cards away from them.
I totally agree. The difference now is that it's not that the Lebanese government is stronger or the Lebanese military is stronger. In fact, they're terrified of Hezbollah and they're also infiltrated by Hezbollah. The beauty of this meeting is that it's the first time that Lebanon is actually, in its way, acknowledging that Israel is doing a good thing by fighting Hezbollah, rather than saying, you're bombing our country, you're ruining our country. Finally, you're hearing voices from Lebanon saying, we don't want you to bomb our country. First of all, Hezbollah uses civilian infrastructure to commit its terrorism, like Hamas, like the Islamic Republic, etc. That's their MO, right? They hide behind civilians. And that's why Israel tells the civilian population to evacuate, and in this case, move north, move beyond the Litani River, etc. But it's the first time that the Lebanese government is not attacking Israel for doing it. So if Lebanon were to say, look, we'll make a deal, we're just weak, please keep fighting. And that's not what they're saying, but it's implied to some extent, because they did not demand that we stop firing on Hezbollah while they went to Washington, while the group met in Washington. So that's a hint. That's a good sign that they didn't say. At first they did say, yes, so let's have a ceasefire and, with Hezbollah as well, and then we'll have talks. No, and Israel did not agree to it. And President Trump didn't insist on it. He didn't insist that Israel stop firing on Hezbollah during this ceasefire with Iran. And Lebanon, in the end, didn't insist on having that as a precondition for meeting in Washington with Secretary Rubio. So these are all good signs. But without military defeat, Hezbollah is going to, Hezbollah, again, they're like cockroaches. You kill some, then more crop up. You have to solve this. It's not enough militarily, but you have to solve it by pressure from all directions. Military is one form.
I think the military component is essential. It's not just one form, it's essential. And I think we have a good card to play because, as you know, Ruthie, we have at the moment a large Israeli force, boots on the ground in southern Lebanon, which are dealing with Hezbollah's infrastructure there in the south. Now, of course, Hezbollah has infrastructure in the north as well. Some of the rockets fired in Israel are fired from other parts of Lebanon, not from the south. But what is the crucial change here? Because Israel is on the ground, and Israel has said, the defense minister has said, Israel Katz has said, we are in Lebanon until we can be convinced that Hezbollah is not going to return to the south and pose an attack to Israel. In other words, we have a card to play in a peace agreement with Lebanon. The minute you can guarantee, the government of Lebanon can guarantee that Israel will not face hostile fire from Lebanon, not from the Lebanese state, but from Lebanese territory. I'm talking about Hezbollah, of course. Then we stay put. And I think that's very powerful leverage, right? The idea that Israel pulls out and there's some UN force, be there, done that, doesn't help. Israel will stay put in southern Lebanon in lieu of a peace agreement that sees Hezbollah disarmed and Lebanese sovereignty in southern Lebanon. Not quasi, what am I trying to say here? Not just, something that's symbolic Lebanese presence, but real Lebanese government presence and not Hezbollah. So we've got this card to play. We have to play it at the right time, and it should be an incentive for Lebanon to do the right things. You want Israel to leave the south, you have to disarm Hezbollah. You have to make sure that Hezbollah isn't a threat towards Israel. Now, their ability to do that today is very limited, and that's why we'll be staying in southern Lebanon for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something else that occurred to me about Lebanon and why, and maybe the Lebanese government has eyes maybe on the Abraham Accords, because what is it? What are the Lebanese politicians, what are they witnessing? They're witnessing a whole reshaping of the world order. President Trump has been attacking NATO countries for not doing their bit. We see that the Abraham Accords countries are being under attack by Iran during this war. They got more missiles fired at them than Israel got. So what you're seeing is a realignment. And maybe Lebanon is saying, wow, that, you mentioned these international forces like UNIFIL. Not only was UNIFIL useless in Lebanon, but it was in cahoots with Hezbollah and also did what the UN always does, condemned Israel, said that we fired purposely on UNIFIL forces. It was a lie. Okay, they were in bed with them the way UNRWA was in bed with Hamas. Maybe the Lebanese government is saying, look, here's our opportunity. We see that President Trump, we see what Europe is attacking Trump, attacking Israel, and actually the Abraham Accords countries are stepping up. So if there's a realignment, Lebanon would probably prefer to be in that that protective, let's say, umbrella.
I agree, and I think we're talking about a larger regional change, which started in the Abraham Accords in Trump's first term, and I think as a result of this war against Iran and Israel's fighting against Hezbollah, I think that process only gets stronger. More and more people in the Arab world, they might not love Israel, they might not, call themselves Zionists, they might have solidarity with the Palestinians because that's their co-religionists and their fellow Arabs and so forth. But ultimately, they understand that Israel is a regional power. They respect Israel, and they understand that it's good to have a peace deal with Israel. It's good to live in Israel with a good neighborly relationship. More and more people in Lebanon want that. Even the Syrian talks about making a deal, some sort of deal with Israel. And so I think we're seeing, to use the Shimon Peres term, we're seeing in many ways a new Middle East based on Arabs and Israelis working together because it's in our mutual interest to do so. And I think what we've seen, the truth is, you've said, Ruthie, you want this regime to fall as quickly as possible. I'm not sure it will fall quickly. It might take more time. I'd like it to fall, as I've said, but it could take more time. But one of the positive things of it not falling is that as long as the Arab states see Iran as a threat, that pushes them more towards making peace with Israel. Why are the Lebanese talking to Israel more and more? Because they want someone to help them deal with their Hezbollah problem. And so I think this process of Arab-Israeli reconciliation will get stronger and stronger. The Palestinians will get nothing more than lip service from their Arab brethren.
Oh, definitely. I couldn't agree more. Although I just want to say, I want to make 2 points. One is, every time you talk about it, you say things like, well, it's not that those countries, are becoming Zionist or that they love Israel or they love Jews. You know what's ironic about it? It's the West that hates Israel now. It's the West that's turning on the Jews. Anti-Semitism is exploding all over the place. Again, an irony of the shift in the world order. That's number one. So you don't even have to say it's not that they suddenly love Israel. Yeah, I'd like to see Britain and France and all these other countries, So I got to tell you, the way they are allies, we don't need that kind of alliance, okay? I would rather have an alliance with Arab countries who actually, like you said, respect our power, which brings me to what you said about Shimon Peres's, new Middle East. He believed in that phony kind of new Middle East, but peace is busting out all over. This kind of peace is genuine if it's based on peace through strength and interests, as you said, and not some kind of la-la land baloney peace agreement type of, because every time somebody like Shimon Peres used the words peace, you had to duck from the missiles and suicide bombings coming at you. And all I'm saying now is that if we have new alliances with Arab countries and they end up being stronger than they are with Europe, well, so be it. It's a shame, okay? Because Europe is going to see that its behavior and its policies now are going to bring it down. We say the regime in Iran will fall. Europe is going to die if it keeps up its horrific policies, both of immigration, appeasement of terrorism, attacks on Israel. They're going to see what happens to their societies. And so it's fine with me if we have peace through strength with our Arab neighbors. Yes.
Because you mentioned Europe, and yesterday was Yom HaShoah in Israel, the Holocaust Memorial Day according to the Hebrew calendar. Maybe I'll spend the last 2 minutes, because we're running to the end of our program, and talk about Yom HaShoah. And Israel faces challenges, yes, and the war with Iran is not over. Fighting in Lebanon, Israeli soldiers in action in Gaza, in Syria, we've got Israelis. We face many threats, but there's no doubt today that Israel is the preeminent regional power in the Middle East, and we have the closest friend in the world in the United States of America, which is the regional superpower, the global superpower. Now, why do I say this? I've said once, I think before on this program, my father was born in Magdeburg, Germany in 1931. And what world was it there for Jews? Yes, we were the victims, we were stateless, we were persecuted, we suffered genocide. His generation of Jews went through the horrors of the Holocaust. Where are we today with all our problems? We should never forget this. The Jewish people are no longer stateless. The Jewish people are no longer helpless. And most importantly, the Jewish people are no longer defenseless. We can defend ourselves against those who seek to hurt us, and we should never forget that. Yom HaShoah is about remembering the 6 million who were murdered, but it's also about remembering that we were once a people that couldn't protect itself. And Zionism and the Zionist revolution and the establishment of the State of Israel has given the Jews the power that all other countries have, the ability to be sovereign and the ability to protect our people. And the fact that there is one country on the planet that says we are the Jewish state and that we will prioritize protecting the Jewish people, that's a huge change, a positive change, and something that I think we can all be very proud of.
Oh, no question about it. And, unfortunately, many Israelis were so traumatized on October 7th, 2023, feeling that, wow, we said never again, but we almost had it again. Okay. However, as you pointed out, we quickly overcame that by fighting. We did not end up succumbing to that threat. So, yes, it's an important lesson. I agree with you 100%. And before we sign off, I would just like to ask viewers who, if you liked our content, please like, subscribe, and join us next time.
See you next week, Ruthie.
אני כל הרגל שלי פצועה, כל הרגל שלי יש לי חירורים, אבא כל הרגליים שלו, כרמל גם. אמא לא, את אמא עומדת למות, אני אומרת לכם.
Do you want to know how hell looks like on earth? Welcome to Kibbutz Be'eri. 2 years ago exactly, on the 7th of October, the Bachar family was in hell. A 3-meter on a 3-meter hell. Come with me and find out this unbelievable story of the Bachar family.
We were in the safe room. We were 4 persons in the safe room. It's me, Dana. I have 4 children. My old son, Rotem, he was in India in the thing. Nofar, the second is 19 years old. He's in the army.
And then you have Carmel and Hadar. And they were in the house with you and Dana.
6:30, the kibbutz with a lot of people. You know why? Because on October 6th, we just celebrate our birthday, the kibbutz birthday. It's been like 70 years. We are like 1,100 people, but in the same day, we were like 1,400. This is the master bedroom. We were here, and we start hearing the shooting. It's not the shooting, it's the thunder, like the missiles goes above us.
That whistle of the missile?
Yeah, a lot of them. So me and Dana here, and we are hear the rockets, and we know something happened. And
it's usual, right?
Yeah, it's usual. But in usual, there are 2 helicopters up, 1 drone, and after 5 minutes, a few missiles to Gaza, and that's it, it's done. This is the usual. But in the same day, it's not like that.
If I tell you in the world that the usual thing is that you hear rockets flying all over your heads and then lands in your backyard, you can't say it's usual. This is missiles, rockets, literally sent from Gaza to Israel, to Kibbutz Be'eri. But the people here in Israel has gotten used to it. I promise you, you have no idea what we're talking about. So year after year, year after year after year, Hamas, the terrorist organization who ruled Gaza, kept sending missiles, launching missiles to Israel.
And I told Dana, okay, there is something wrong, And I told her, okay, let's go downstairs to see where's the children, and because our safe room is in the downstairs. This is Adar rooms, and we met right here. And this room is Carmel's room.
Carmel's room. Hadar, Carmel is here.
When we start to speak to them and say, okay, look what's going on, because all the racket, and we start laughing on ourselves because we thought there is a racket and, you know, like a zikukim, and came to Gaza to celebrate our birthday.
Fireworks.
And the fireworks, and we are and we're going out because we want to see the rockets. And we look up to the border, that's the border over there. So you can see all the rockets goes above all of.
That's Gaza over here. Just 4-kilometer walk. You know, if you can walk fast, it's 6 minutes per kilometer. Then you'd find yourself here within 24 minutes in Gaza just walking. That's how it's close to Kibbutz Be'eri.
And around 10 minutes to 7, you start hear the shooting in the middle of the kibbutz. And they came in and they start shooting all over. They running through our place and where we live, and they start shooting everyone. And the chat start talking about everything. Also, they shoot these people, they burn this house, they kill this one, and everything in the chat.
Wow.
And,
So while you're standing here, you're looking at the WhatsApp group and you're literally seeing them just saying, this was killed, this was killed, this was killed, this was killed.
Absolutely.
In the WhatsApp group, you're getting a message, go to the safe room.
Yeah, go to the safe room because there's a terrorist in the kibbutz. Okay. You have to go to the safe room.
And that was 7:10.
We got into the house, we shield the house, and we locked the door. I told Dana and Carmel and Adar, okay, let's go to the safe room. And Carmel told me, wait, Dad. He went to the kitchen. He brought a few hardcore steel knife. He played with them like that. He told me, Dad, don't worry, we're gonna fight with them.
What's a safe room? A safe room, it is a bomb shelter. So in terms of when rockets are being launched from Gaza to here, you go to this safe room and plus minus you are protected even if a rocket falls very near the building that you are in, but only in a safe room. And that's why the Israelis on the 7th of October immediately ran to the bomb shelter, but then you told me that the bomb shelter became a trap.
A bomb shelter, you have to fight on the hand door because you can't lock the bomb shelters. Because if somebody wants to help you, you just open the door.
The door?
We're waiting, yeah.
So you closed the door and you waited here? Was this window
we closed
shut?
Everything
closed?
Yes, we closed the two.
Everything
there's
closed?
Two panels. Yeah, there's two panels. We
There's
closed
also
the two.
here.
The stock. It's,
yeah, of course,
yes.
it's stuck because of that. But
so we closed everything. We also closed the glass.
So everything was closed?
Yes. Adar, she's sitting here, really close to the wall. And Dana, she's over there.
So Dana's here, Hadar is here.
You are. Help me. It's around 8:30 in the morning, we hear the bell ringing. I'm standing right here, you know, like you're in stress, like you're holding like that, and Carmel helped me, and you hear the steps on the floor. You know that the terrorists, they're not coming to looking for us in the second floor. They come straight to the safe room. Because of course they knew.
They knew.
They knew because they killed the people up. That means the other in the neighborhood.
And they were in the safe house.
They knew that all the people in the kibbutz, they are in the safe room.
Targeting intentionally civilians, knowing that they are going to be in the safe room. This is a war crime.
And the terrorists, they came, they start, you know, like a hand fight, exactly the same. Yeah, they try to open, and you know? Absolutely. They try to open and we close, they try to open and we close, and suddenly one of the terrorists told me, Iftach al-Bab. open the door. I told him, go away, Ruh.
Ruh, go away.
Yeah. And he told me again, open the door. And I even say the second go, a shot through the door. We're holding the handle like that. And Carmel, my son, he's standing here.
And is he pushing with your hand in out?
About me, he pushed on me. So this one, it's Carmel blood from his arm, because this bullet took his arm, both arms. Carmel, you know, is with Arabic, so he cursed in Arabic. And he told me, he said, oh no, there's no Sri Lanka, because it's supposed to be in December in Sri Lanka. He was a surfer.
Oh my God,
the only thing,
yeah,
the only thing he thought about, it's about the sea, his surfboard.
He's a surfer,
and yeah, he was a surfer. He was a great surfer.
That shot you in the arm and in your legs.
In my legs.
And you keep going.
I keep standing on that. The right leg is died. There's nothing left in the right leg. The left one, you feel something happened to her. You don't know exactly what happened.
Like it's
like
burning.
It's like, you know, when you go to the gym, you feel your muscle a bit
Yeah.
strong. That's how you feel.
Yeah.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
And I saw, because I'm really recognized like that, I look to the floor, and I saw a few tears of blood on the floor, and I talked to myself. I said that, but I'm all right. And I saw that this bullet took my arm, and the blood go from my arms. So a few seconds later, I collapsed. I fell into
What time that was?
9:30. 30 minutes later, there are heavy smoke getting.
Around 10 o'clock?
It's around 10 o'clock. It's a heavy smoke.
Where the heavy smoke is coming from?
They brought everything. In Isberi, it was a system. First of all, they shot. Second, they burn. And later, when you jump out from the window, they kill you outside in the backyard. It's a system. There's 150 houses like that, or more than that.
אני לא יודעת איפה היא ממליצה, אבל היא היחידה שכמעט מאבדת את הכרה, היא וכרמל. אני בעבוד קצת בסדר, אני הכי בסדר.
Hamas terrorists, the Nukhba unit, which is the elite unit of Hamas, they came first, they did what they did, they left to another house. So now you're telling me that the civilians...
Yes, they gave the mission to other people, burn them.
And they're not like part of the Nukhba, they're literally
I don't know
Gazans.
who are they, but maybe it's not the Nukhba, because the Nukhba, they got a weapon and they go to kill the other people. But they know that, okay, if there's a heavy smoke in the safe room, you have to jump out from the window. And the Nukhba, they're waiting for you here, while they're not waiting here.
Gotcha.
And when you jump out, they kill you there.
So that massacre on the 7th of October, not only official Hamas members, terrorists, took part of it, but also civilians took part in the massacre. And there's countless evidence to that, by the way, which you can see all over the social media of civilians, Gazans, who came to the settlements here in southern of Israel and literally took part of the massacre. They start burning, smoke is coming in.
Smoke coming in, a lot of smoke, a heavy smoke. Everything is closed. We open just the glass window. That's it. We open that one, and you can't breathe. And when you can't breathe anymore, I told them, okay, you have to take the pots of Bebka with the pee and the towel, and with the blood, it's become like a glue.
Yeah.
And we put it on the face. You can breathe through it. It's easier, but it's not good for a long time.
So wait,
because
you breathe pee and blood?
Of course. You want to survive, you have to.
What happened after that?
The terrorists, they decide to open the window because they saw that we didn't jump out. They decide to open the window. They put a big bomb on the window. If you go for the other side, you can see it. And they explode this fucking window.
זרקו לי רימון, ברגל יש לי חור, אני מנסה להחזיק את זה, יש לי ברגל 5 חורים. זרקו עלינו רימונים, ירו בנו.
When they explode this one, the right one stuck in a frame is not moved. But the second one moved like 10 centimeters to the side.
So there was like a gap?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a gap. So for us, it was good. Because
Smoke is getting out.
Absolutely. The hair comes from the door, and the smoke get in, go up, and go down. That's how it's going. So I'm looking around, so we are still alive. We are all right. But that's the good things. The war things, we got 3 grenades inside. And when they throw the grenade hit the wall here and fell into the drawer.
That's the first explosion here, you can see it. That's the second explosion. And what about the third grenade? It didn't explode. So you had with you a grenade, live grenade, that did not explode.
Yes. You feel like your ears in the plastic bags. That's how you feel. I'm looking around, so we are still alive. So all the shrapnels, you can see all over, all the shrapnels go up, most of them. And the terrorists, they took like a metal stick, like a magnet stick. They put on the grenade, and they wrapped the grenade with metal balls, screws, and needles.
By the way, this is another act of a war crime, yeah?
And Ada, she told me, at the same time, that's not a real grenade. I tell you why you say that? Because she's 13. And she told me because I got a lot of screws in my legs. And now we are bleeding, we are 3 bleeding in the safe room. Dana, until now, she's all right. And I'm, bleeding from my legs and in Carmel, but it's all right. But we were on the floor. We hear 2 shots, and Dana told me, I can't breathe. Adar, she tried to clean it a little bit. She told Adar, it's done. And she told us, I don't have nothing for nobody in this world, and she died.
Avida, you knew that your wife died.
Yes.
And you are without legs, with a bullet also in your arm, with a kid who is injured in his arm. They're trying to keep him alive. And you have a daughter that was also hit from shrapnels. And at this time, you realize that you lost your wife as well. Yet you still have the power to tell your daughter,
Mommy, she's all right. She's not suffering anymore. She died. We have to keep him alive. Around 4:30, Carmel, he knew that go out for the safe room. He knew that. Around 5 o'clock afternoon, Carmel, he got his short breath and he died.
כרמל, תישאר איתנו. אל תעצור עיניים. אמא, תישאר איתנו.
Before he died, he told me, Dad, don't forget. So burying me with the surfboard. And Ada, she saw me, and she told me, Dad, don't leave me alone. Because she saw me, I'm almost gonna die here. And she called 911 again. My dad almost gonna die, what am I supposed to do? And the 911, they record everything.
בסדר. איפה היריות? הן מתחילות מהאגן עצמו או מהרגליים למטה?
Around 7:30, 7:15, the commander of Yalom, he came to this window. He took his flashlight, looked into the safe room, and told the other guy, there is a massacre here in the safe room. So if you want to live next to them, you can't. I think we give them any money, any opportunities. They don't want to kill us. I think they want to live like us, but they don't. They don't want to live like us. They don't want me here. They want to take my land. It's not about something about religious. It's nothing. It's about territory and land. That's it.
You were in hell. There's no other definition to what you went through on the 7th of October. There's a lot of people around the world that either they deny what happened here, and clearly we can see the evidence is countless, yeah? And of course your story as a first eyewitness that went through hell. What do you have to say to the world for those who are right now supporting the terrorist organization Hamas, literally advocating and echoing the narrative of Hamas.
We have to know that the Islamic here next to us, it's a really want to kill us because our land. We can see the Palestinian here, and if you move to Europe, I'm sure it's going to be there also. And we have to keep on ourselves, and for the Jewish nation, I think we have to be in Israel. This is the only state that we got, and we have to keep on it for many generations forward.
That for them, there is no such thing as let's have a dialogue. They don't think about maybe let's hear the other side. There's no freedom of speech. There's also no freedom of religion. That's a different topic. But the bottom line is, you do not have dialogue with them because they don't believe in dialogue. They have their own way. You're either with them or against them. If you're with them, your life might be saved, might be saved. But if you're against it, for sure, you're dead.
When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order. ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Ladar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel with all of the biggest stories from across the region. Here are the latest developments. There's been a dramatic escalation in the Gulf just ahead of the second round of U.S.-Iran talks, which are due to take place in Islamabad tomorrow. A U.S. Navy destroyer has seized an Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. U.S. Central Command Monday morning said U.S. Marines departed the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli by helicopter and transited over the Arabian Sea to board and seize the Iranian-flagged Tuska. The Marines rappelled onto the vessel after a guided missile from the USS Spruance disabled the Tuska's propulsion. This after the commercial ship failed to comply with repeated warnings from the U.S. for over 6 hours. Washington says the ship was under sanctions with a history of illegal activity and that its cargo is being inspected. The incident unfolded in the Gulf of Oman, just south of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply flows, and took place just 2 days before the 2-week ceasefire is set to expire. And despite the maritime incident, U.S. President Donald Trump insists U.S.-Iran talks will resume tomorrow in Pakistan, with White House envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff heading to Islamabad for negotiations, as well as U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Trump warned that if Tehran does not agree to a deal, the consequences would be severe, saying the country could be blown up, and adding that potential targets include Iranian bridges and power plants. Trump said his demands include reopening the Strait of Hormuz and Iran giving up its highly enriched uranium. The president expressed optimism, saying the concept of the deal is done and there is a very good chance of success. President Trump also did not rule out meeting directly with Iranian leaders. But while President Trump says talks are on, Iranian officials have been sending mixed signals. On Sunday night, according to the regime's official news agency, they rejected the second round of talks. Today, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman reiterated that Iran will not join the talks in Pakistan. And additionally, according to Reuters, differences over Iran's nuclear program still remain. And Tehran says its missile program is not open to negotiation, casting doubt on whether an agreement will be reached by the time the ceasefire expires in 2 days. At this hour, there are reports that Iran is reconsidering its stance and will in fact attend the talks in Islamabad. Meanwhile, Pakistan is reportedly exerting maximum pressure on Iran to ensure that the talks do go ahead as scheduled tomorrow. But at this hour, it still remains unclear if the talks will in fact be held and whether any real progress will be made towards advancing a deal. Joining us now to discuss the latest with the Islamic Republic of Iran is Hussein Abdul Hussein, Research Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So I've been saying this all day. We're heading for really a critical juncture here. The ceasefire coming to an end on Wednesday. Talks are supposed to resume in Pakistan tomorrow. We're hearing, of course, two different versions. The United States, President Trump insisting that talks will take place and a deal is practically agreed upon. He's saying that all the major issues have pretty much been agreed upon and that Iran has caved on them. But in Iran, they're telling a different story, saying that huge gaps still remain. There will be no talks. Now they're saying there might be talks. It looks like there will, in fact, be talks taking place tomorrow. But, you know, with all of this rhetoric, we can call it, all of this sort of cloud of confusion hanging over the talks, what can we expect to see tomorrow?
Well, the first thing is that the end of the ceasefire doesn't mean automatically going back to shooting. The ceasefire might lapse and then everyone might just wait until things change before the shooting starts again. Number two, I think there are two things that you see happening at the same time. Each one of the two sides has a set of statements that addresses a domestic audience, and then each one of them has another set of statements that address one another, mostly behind closed doors. So what do they say behind closed doors? You know, we've heard all kinds of stuff, including that Iran agreed to everything and Iran didn't agree to anything. So I would say there's not much we can tell from where the two parties are, except that the gap has always been big. And even if the negotiators, even if the Iranian negotiators promise that they would do X, Y, and Z, we're not sure that they can deliver. This is all what we know so far, which makes the whole scene even more complicated than you described it.
Trump is placing, as we know, President Trump is placing an emphasis on the nuclear issue, as well as the Strait of Hormuz, of course. And as well, we have the issue of the ballistic missiles, which is very crucial to Israel because, of course, we've seen missiles hitting Israel throughout this war. But according to the regime's officials, if we're to believe them, Iran is unwilling to negotiate on its ballistic missile program, unwilling to give up its enriched uranium. United States, of course, saying the opposite. I mean, so do we have any indication if gaps do in fact still remain, and if so, what these gaps are?
Look, the ballistic missile issue is not really just a separate issue. Any nuclear head needs to be delivered by a vehicle, and the ballistic missile is the vehicle. And this is why, even in 2015, when President Obama arrived at this JCPOA deal with Iran, John Kerry, the Secretary of State at the time, demanded that the ballistic missiles be in the agreement. And at the time, he was strict because Jawad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, said, listen, let's keep it out, but we promise you that we will not develop a long-range ballistic missile. Of course, Iranian promises are just promises. They're never real. A few weeks after that, Iran started experimenting with ballistic missiles to the extent that embarrassed John Kerry, and he came out and said, well, the Iranians are violating the spirit of the JCPOA agreement, but not its letter, which is, some sort of a weird explanation. So we have known all along that the ballistic missile issue has been part of the nuclear file as far back as Obama's time. I don't think President Trump, will look at this and think, okay, let's just agree on the uranium stuff and let's leave the ballistic missile stuff out of it. I think it's a package. I don't see how the United States can just agree to one and let the other not go.
Mm-hmm. And back to one of the main points of contention is, of course, the Strait of Hormuz. Now, there is a U.S. naval blockade in place at the moment. We just saw this escalation where the U.S. seized an Iranian-flagged ship. But Iran, in turn, has announced it's shutting down the strait. It itself has attacked 2 ships over the weekend. So what can you tell us about the status of the Strait of Hormuz right now? And more importantly, what Iran's capabilities are, what capabilities remain in terms of blocking ships from, in fact, passing in the strait?
Well, from the get-go, Iran's ability to block ships was to actually use explosive drones to hit them. And we saw Iran hit a couple of tankers. Short of that, the Iranians don't really have that much of capabilities. They can always send IRGC speedboats to try to pirate these ships. But if any of these ships has some sort of a military escort, then even that plan doesn't work. So for the Iranians to block the Strait of Hormuz, they need to seriously violate the ceasefire. Now, what happens as we, the United States, block Iranian ports and the Strait of Hormuz? I think time is on our side, and it's not on the Iranian side. Number one, the price of oil has dropped substantially, and after Iran said, now we're back to closing the strait. And number two, the Iranians have a ticking clock on so many things. They need to export some oil because otherwise they will have to shut down their oil wells, and that'd be very costly for them for the production moving forward. And number two, they need to import some gasoline for domestic use. So Iran has maybe 10 to 20 days. After that, things will be really, really bad for them. I think President Trump is aware of this, and this is one of the cards, the strong cards that he's using against the Iranians, believing that sooner or later they will cave and they will have to deal with him over the Hormuz and the other issues.
And do the Iranians have any leverage left?
Well, look, other than the missiles and the drones, since day one, this is the only thing that the Iranians have. And this is the problem that even someone, a terrorist organization like Hezbollah has. They either engage in full-scale war or their hands are tied. They don't really have sanctions. They don't really have other tools. They don't have a navy, an air force, infantry. So the only thing they can do is really launch fire missiles and drones on other countries. And when they do that, it means it's a full-scale war. So Iran and Hezbollah can either engage in full-scale war, or their tools are really not much beyond that. So when we are in a ceasefire, when they're not in a full-scale war, I think their options are really much, much more limited than during wartime.
And let's talk for a moment as well about the Gulf countries. They, of course, were on the receiving end of many Iranian ballistic missiles throughout this war. What is their stance today? Because they've been very quiet lately. We haven't heard much from them since the ceasefire took effect. There's been several reports that behind the scenes, they're actually urging President Trump to continue with the fighting, with the war, to see this regime fall. What can you tell us about their stance today?
So number one, they're not a bloc. Each one of them is behaving differently. We can discern 2 blocks within the GCC bloc. You have the UAE and Bahrain. Neither one of them has diplomatic ties with Iran. The Bahrain didn't have ties even before the war. The UAE severed its ties with Iran. Whereas compared to Qatar and Kuwait and the Saudis, they just maintained the embassy, their embassy in Iran and Iran's embassy on their territory. So you have two blocs behaving differently. The Emiratis have been really outspoken in their opposition to the IRGC and moving forward, not even behind closed doors. We have senior Emirati officials saying that, or encouraging President Trump to finish off the regime, saying that there's no way the region can coexist with the regime anymore. On the other hand, you have the Saudis. They have been more tame in their response. Now, of course, the Qataris have been have acted the nicest to Iran. We have seen that the Qatari soft power, Al Jazeera, and these media channels have played nicely with the Iranians all along. And toward the last 2 weeks of the war, we have also seen Iran not target Qatar as it targeted other Gulf countries, especially the UAE and Bahrain. And then you have the Saudis, who on the second day after the ceasefire, their foreign minister took a phone call from the Iranian foreign minister. He didn't ask for any apology. He didn't ask for any reparations. You wouldn't know that Iran was really pummeling Saudi Arabia with all kinds of ballistic missiles and explosive drones. So you have all kinds of behavior. I think the Emiratis and the Bahrainis have been really strong and stiff on the Iranian regime, whereas you have the Qataris and the Saudis who have been really mellow and nice toward the Iranians.
Now, looking into Iran, inside of Iran, we're seeing the political branch on the one hand and the IRGC, and there's a lot of, talk that they seem to be at odds at the moment. At least that's the public perception. If the political branch is negotiating, as we've seen, will the IRGC even abide by any agreement reached with the United States?
Look, I think it's a bit of a stretch to call these guys, Arakji and Khalibaf, a political branch. Arakji is an RGC operative. He's, some call him a part of the RGC intel. And Khalibaf is also very close to the RGC. So these guys are RGC. What we're looking at, and you're right when you say there's a schism. What we're looking at is that this headless regime has now branched out into different factions, and each one of them has a different idea of how to proceed and how to move forward. We think that Vahidi and Rizai, these guys on the military side, have been more radical, and they want the war to go on. And then you have the Khalibaf and Arakji, and these guys are, they're thinking maybe a ceasefire or maybe some sort of an agreement with America would be good at this point. But all of what you see is RGC. All of what you see is really radical. There's nothing, as we used to think, a reformist or a moderate or any kind of nice guys in the Iranian regime. If they're nice, then they're not in the regime. But this said, like we've been discussing, you have schools. Some of them are more radical than the others. But at the end of the day, I think all of them are the same. All of them are radical. All of them would repress and oppress the Iranians, and the internet is still down. So all of them come from the same school.
Absolutely. I think in Iran, to have any bit of power, you have to be linked somehow to the radical IRGC and the radical elements. So really critical days ahead. Hussein Abdul Hussein, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And turning now to Lebanon, where amid the fragile 10-day ceasefire, the IDF published a map showing its new forward defense line. This as the IDF maintains its presence in southern Lebanon. The army says 5 IDF divisions alongside naval forces are operating south of the line to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure and prevent threats to northern Israeli communities. The map shows that troops have crossed the Litani River, a key geographic marker long associated with efforts to push Hezbollah forces northward, and are holding the strategic Beaufort Ridge. Defense Minister Katz says that troops will use full force to counter any threats to troops. And before we continue, a quick word from Hadassah. All right, well, We seem to have a little technical difficulty with that, so let's continue on to some positive news. There was a warm diplomatic embrace in Jerusalem, as just a short while ago, President Isaac Herzog presented Argentina's President Javier Milei with the Presidential Medal of Honor in recognition of his contributions to the State of Israel. Milei arrived in Israel yesterday as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu greeted him with a warm hug, with Netanyahu joking about the similarity between Javier and the Hebrew word chaver, meaning friend, before giving a thumbs up to cameras. Netanyahu telling his guest, "It warms my heart that you're here." After their meeting, the two announced the launch of the Isaac Accords, aimed at strengthening ties between Israel and Latin America. Earlier, just hours after landing in Israel, Milei headed straight to the Western Wall, the spiritual heart of the Jewish people, marking his third visit to Israel since taking office. Let's take a look.
Vivimos un momento en que los valores que nos dieron civilización y, por último, reiteramos nuestra voluntad de trasladar la Embajada Argentina a Jerusalén apenas las condiciones lo permitan. Lo consideramos necesario, pero sobre todo justo. Tal como nos enseñan las Sagradas Escrituras, el mundo se sostiene sobre tres cosas: la justicia, la verdad y la paz. Ese es el hemisferio americano que queremos construir juntos. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo! Y ¡Am Israel High!
Milei is also expected to take part in Israel's Independence Day ceremony, where he will light a torch tomorrow night. At the rehearsal ceremony, he took to the stage to join the singers. Let's take a look. So really incredible vibes from the Argentinian president. I think now we have that word from Hadassah. Let's take a look.
Deep underground in Jerusalem, in fortified operating rooms, intensive care units, and maternity wards, doctors and nurses urgently treat patients even while rockets are flying and sirens are blaring. Hadassah built these hospitals and is working to rapidly expand these underground facilities. Additional hospital beds and 6 advanced operating rooms are urgently needed. Please go to hadassah.org. Make a gift that helps Hadassah continue its long-standing, life-changing support of the Israeli people. Thank you.
And before we celebrate Israel's Independence Day, we first prepare to mark Yom HaZikaron, or Memorial Day, beginning at 8 p.m. Israel time. The day will be marked by a 1-minute siren tonight at 8 o'clock and a 2-minute siren Tuesday morning, as the country comes to a standstill in remembrance. This year, the toll has risen sharply. More than 170 soldiers have been added to the list of Israel's fallen since last Memorial Day, alongside 54 veterans who died from service-related injuries. In total, more than 25,640 men and women have died defending the State of Israel, with nearly 60,000 bereaved family members nationwide. Joining us now with more on Yom HaZikaron and Israel's upcoming Independence Day is Ruti Bloom, senior editor of JNS. Ruti, always wonderful to have you.
Great to be here, Lidar.
So, as I've been saying all day, we really are facing critical days ahead. You know, the ceasefire is set to expire in 2 days. Talks are supposed to take place tomorrow between the Islamic regime and the United States to basically determine if we're going to see some kind of deal or we're going back to war. So, first of all, what can you tell our viewers? What is the mood in the country today heading into Yom HaZikaron?
Well, to answer that, let me just tell you a little anecdote. And yesterday I was coming back from running errands, and I saw two neighbors on a bench outside a laundromat. One of these neighbors is someone I met in the bomb shelter. 6 weeks going back and forth. We got to know each other quite well. And next to him was another woman I didn't know. And I said, how are you? Fine, how are you? And he was someone who was very upset about the ceasefire, both with Iran and with Lebanon. And I said, well, it looks like this Yom Ha'atzmaut, we're going to be meeting up in the bomb shelter again. And the woman next to he said, I hope so. And the woman next to him said to me, couldn't you just wait can you just let us have our holiday? As though I'm the person running the war. I said, I'll try to let you have your holiday. So that's the Israeli mood. It's like, okay, we're accepting. Can we just celebrate before we go back to the bomb shelters? I think most Israelis do not believe that any deal with Iran can be anything other than false and leaving the regime in power, which is unacceptable. So, I personally believe that we're headed back for war.
You know, it's very interesting that you say that because it's been a very tough year for Israel. You know, continuous war, essentially, really since October 7th, 2023. The past 6 weeks, as you said, you've been running into bomb shelters, some people living in bomb shelters. Now we have over 170 fallen. Now, President Trump is expressing, great optimism that a deal is really within reach. But on the other hand, we have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just a very short while ago at one of the Yom HaZikaron ceremonies, essentially saying the operation is not over. This war is not over. So I understand that you don't see any positive outcome coming out of these talks in Islamabad tomorrow.
No, because you can't negotiate with jihadists, first of all. Second of all, it's not as though the remnants of the Iranian regime, it's not as though any of them have any interest in capitulating to the West. So though there are, as Hussein pointed out, your previous guest, that they're all part of the Revolutionary Guards. So there are you could say the so-called pragmatists, but even their pragmatism doesn't lie in wanting peace. It lies in deceiving the West. It lies in saying, look, we're running out of money, we're running out of resources. As President Trump pointed out, they don't have an Air Force, they don't have a Navy, they don't have most of their leaders, and they're out of money. So the pragmatists are saying, look, let's just, make a deal, and so we can rebuild and we can keep our power base. So of course I don't believe in any deal with such a regime. And the question is this, now President Trump says, I'm optimistic, but then he says he's optimistic about a deal. I would have preferred to hear him say he's optimistic that Iran is going to surrender unconditionally. I don't like the word deal because I think it's misleading. I know that President Trump says he's victorious and by the way, he's right. There is nothing to compare this situation today to before all the war that has been going on. Epic Fury and Rising Lion, they are both, they've been totally successful. And yes, there are great victories. But as Netanyahu said, it's not done yet because they still have some capability and they're still in power.
So do you see any ray of light at the end of the tunnel? Any optimistic note here that you can share with the viewers?
Well, I consider it optimistic if we have to go back to war. I don't consider that pessimistic, actually. Nobody likes war. But as we've seen, first of all, you know, for decades, everybody, the whole world, and especially Israel, everyone was afraid of Iran. You know, you can't poke the bear because they will just, you know, we'll all be dead and they'll fire nuclear weapons at us. And what we saw is that it's not true, and that actually Israel and the United States especially, but also together with Israel, proved that Iran was more of a paper tiger than it appeared. That's first of all. And second of all, sometimes the only way you can achieve peace is through military means. It's military and diplomatic, but diplomacy doesn't mean, okay, fine, we'll let the jihadists have, you know, it's like as though there are two sides. Okay, there's the West and there are the jihadists, and we're negotiating as though between equal partners. That's the mistake. Here, the West has to, and President Trump has to dictate to those Iranian leaders, whoever they are. And by the way, they're also saying that they're not even going to come to Pakistan to negotiate. And they've been humiliating President Trump by making fun of him. So, you know, I don't see any alternative, and I don't think that that's a pessimistic view. The optimistic view is that the more they are pressed, the better chance the Iranian people have of ousting them and toppling the regime and replacing it.
So at least hopefully Israelis will have their Independence Day celebrations before a return to war. In fact, Independence Day is on Wednesday, and the ceasefire is set to end Wednesday night. So some people also questioning whether that's a coincidence or not.
Or people will take in leftovers. They'll take their barbecue leftovers into the bomb shelter Wednesday night.
Well, so really, as I've been saying all day, critical days ahead. Ruti Bloom, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on, and happy Independence Day.
And thank you for having me. And sad Memorial Day and happy Independence Day, yes.
And with that, that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Just a reminder that tonight at 8 p.m., Israel will mark Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, to commemorate the fallen, and we will broadcast our ILTV daily news show at 7:30 p.m. Israel time. So that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We're here every hour on the hour with the latest breaking developments, in-depth reports, and exclusive insights into the stories shaping the region and the world. I'm Lidar Lazi. Thank you so much for watching.
Trump is threatening to blow up the most powerful military alliance in history, and after what Europe just did, you might actually understand why. Here's what NATO really is, why Europe's betrayal during the Iran war was unforgivable, and what happens to the world if America actually walks out. Welcome to the Meira K Show on JNS TV. Let's dive right in. So it's 1945 and the Second World War has just ended, leaving Europe in ruins, tens of millions dead, and a continent that has now somehow managed to produce two catastrophic world wars in the space of 30 years. The realization is slowly settling across Western capitals, and it's a terrifying one. If nothing actually changes structurally, it will now happen a third time. At the same time, a new threat is already forming. The Soviet Union, which fought alongside the Allies against Hitler, is now expanding westward, installing communist governments across Eastern Europe one by one. Poland, Romania, Hungary, quickly advancing on the rest of Europe. The individual European nations, which are exhausted and broke from 6 years of war, cannot possibly stand against the Soviet threat alone. So in 1949, 12 countries, including the United States, the UK, France, Canada, and several Western European nations, sit down in Washington and make each other an alliance. A simple promise. If any one of us is attacked, it's an attack on all of us and we defend each other together. The logic is pretty straightforward. The Soviet Union is not going to invade West Germany if doing so means declaring war on America, France, Britain, Canada, and every other member simultaneously. So that invasion never really happens. You don't need to fight a war if your enemy already knows that they can't win it. And that's exactly what NATO is, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And for 77 years, this theory worked. Not a single member has been invaded, and in a continent that destroyed itself twice in a generation, this is actually a pretty miraculous achievement. So what is NATO actually? Think of NATO as the world's most powerful mutual protection agreement, where joining you gets a guarantee that if someone attacks you, everyone else comes to your defense, and in return, you contribute to the collective defense of everyone else. Basically, a big army. The specific promise lives in Article 5, attack one and attack all. It has been invoked exactly once in 77 years, and interestingly enough, it was not to defend a European country. It was invoked to defend America after September 11th, 2001, when NATO countries like France, Britain, Poland, Canada sent their soldiers to fight and die alongside Americans in Afghanistan. When America needed them, they came. That was the entire point of the agreement, deterrence. And that's the context that makes what's happening right now so remarkable. NATO today has 32 full member countries, mostly in Europe and North America, and there are also partner countries, nations that cooperate within the alliance, that train alongside it, share intelligence, but don't get the full protection guarantee. Israel falls into that category as a major non-NATO ally, which we will come back to. Full members get the guarantee of protection, whilst partners get benefits of access. Critically, every single decision in NATO requires unanimous agreement, meaning every member has a veto, which is both the alliance's greatest strength and, as we'll see, a significant weakness. Here's what most coverage skips when they're talking about this. America doesn't just belong to NATO, which is really supposed to be a European protection military. America essentially is NATO's backbone. Right now, there are roughly 80 to 90,000 US troops permanently stationed across Europe, with 36,000 in Germany alone. The US there maintains a military presence since 1952, and there are now thousands more in Italy, Britain, Spain, Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states, across over 40 American military bases on the continent. Beyond the troops themselves, America provides the alliance's entire command architecture, the shared intelligence systems, the satellite networks, the nuclear umbrella, even the supreme allied commander in Europe, the person who actually runs NATO's military operations, has always been an American general. The United States spends about 3.5% of its national income on defense and funds approximately 60% of all of NATO defense spending combined, with the other 31 members covering the remaining 40%. America's permanent contribution to European security is roughly 8 to 9 times larger than everything the rest of the alliance is committed to the front line. Without America, NATO loses the operating system that everything else runs on. Let's also quickly clarify something that most people tend to get wrong. There are actually two different things people mean when they talk about the NATO budget. The first is NATO's actual organizational budget, the money that runs the headquarters, the joint commands, the shared infrastructure, and that's about 5 billion euros in 2026, split relatively fairly amongst the members. The second is the total defense spending of all 32 members combined, which is what Trump is actually talking about. When you add up every country's military budget, every soldier, every ship, every fighter jet, the total in 2025 was over $1.4 trillion. America's share alone was $838 billion. Europe and Canada together, about $500 billion. That means the United States spends more in defense than all other NATO members combined, and its shares equals 60% of everything the entire alliance has spent. But here's the